It usually takes a few seconds for it to show up everywhere, shall we say.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think that's the official signal that we've gone live. Takeda, hello, good morning. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome to Frock Flicks, a fantastic new series coming from the Creed of Contessa and King Henry's Royal Court, a collaboration in which we will be collectively bitching about all of the garbage that there is out there in the entertainment industry vis-a-vis historical costuming. So, Mason, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
Oh, it's every day's an adventure. What can we say? So we're going to start with getting dressed. So I'm going to get dressed first while we wait for more people to join. And then I've got a special treat for the people in my community. You've been asking for it. Here it comes. How a gentleman dresses in mid Tudor England, so Henry VIII style. So I'm going to hopefully we'll have more viewers in time for that. And then Mason's going to walk us through step by step from the underlayers on out. So you all are going to get to witness something you only rarely get to witness on my channel. So yeah, Susan, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Tamikor, allo, ça va? Yeah, so as always, of course, we start with our under things. This is a smocka in 15th century English. Some of you keep using the word shift, and that is just not either a medieval or a Renaissance term. It's just not. The word shift is an invention of, as a reference to an undergarment like this, is an invention of the late 17th century. So if you're talking about medieval undergarments in English, it's a smock. It's not a chemise. Chemise is French. And shift is post-medieval period and even post-16th century. So try not to use the word shift unless you are being intentionally anachronistic. I'm a linguist. These things matter. So after this is the layer that, of course, sits against my skin and protects my overgarments from all of the evils of human skin. Because let's be frank, human skin, even if you wash it regularly, still gets pretty grody throughout the day. So over top of this comes a woolen kirtle. And I just published a short video praising the virtues of wool as a fiber and as a fabric for wearing even in hot conditions. Mason, do you have any wool garments? Are any of the garments you're going to be putting on for us today made of wool, or are they sort of silk or silk-esque, silk adjacent?
I don't know, because I don't make all my stuff, right? I get a fair amount that I just try and get. I make as much as I can, right? Because I'm not great at sewing, but of course I hope soon enough to, with more practice, be able to actually make more and more of my actual outfit.
Right, of course, of course. Well, have you ever worn historical wool garments from the pre-modern era made of wool, a wool doublet or a wool jerkin or anything like that?
I have.
Yeah. And what do you think of wool as a fiber?
It really depends.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense. Like,
absolutely, go on.
The type of, I don't know the proper term, but like, would I say weave? Is that the proper term for?
That is the proper term. Absolutely, 100%.
I find it depends, because sometimes it's just like uncomfortable. Sometimes it will be like the best thing you wear, and you just. I have no one answer.
Yep. No, and actually that's the correct answer. Because here's the problem with wool in the modern era. Most wool, the most frequent wool to which modern people in the West are exposed is blanket wool, right? A wool blanket. And a wool blanket is not, the wool for a wool blanket is not processed in a way that is intended for wear on your body. And so the processing steps that would render wool silky and smooth are skipped for wool that is meant to be turned into a blanket, which means that blanket wool is in fact itchy. And because it's blanket wool meant to keep you warm, it's woven to be warm intentionally. The same thing with coat wool that is intended to make outer garments like coats, like winter coats. That's not itchy, but it's boiled until the weave basically it's boiled and it's fulled until the weave basically vanishes and it just becomes a sheet of almost impermeable wool. But that's not meant to be worn as a regular garment. That's meant to be worn against rain and cold, right? So that means that, yes, you shouldn't wear wool like that in, say, Alabama in the summertime. But as you were commenting, there are plenty of weaves of wool that are wonderful summer fabrics. There are, and in the Middle Ages and the Renaissance, this was true as well. Not all wool was the same. And so, you know, all of these people who say, well, I can't do authentic medieval garments because I live in a tropical country, so I really have to do linen. It's not true. You just haven't found the right wool yet. And yeah, so, and I know that's probably going to trigger a bunch of people.
I think another thing is people think wool, they kind of think of like the stereotypical, like uncomfortable, kind of like Christmas sweater almost. I think that's what people's minds kind of jump to, like the ugly Christmas sweaters. I think that's part of the thing too. People think that, and they're like, oh, but instead of actually focusing on the fact the stuff you're actually supposed to be wearing.
Yep, you're right. Yeah, the ugly Christmas sweater is a fantastic example, right? It's knitted out of chunky, itchy wool, which also probably wasn't meant to be knitted into a sweater that goes against your skin, right? It's same problem. Yep, I agree. I think most people have never seen or touched broadcloth, which in the Middle Ages was a wool, and it's the closest modern equivalents are doeskin and Melton wool. It's a wool that is so smooth and so silky that you might, if you look at it in the right light, you might mistake it for silk. You know, you might mistake it for a silk weave. It's so smooth. I have a length of it. I'm turning it into a beautiful black wool Burgundian style gown that I just stand around and rub it against my skin. When I'm sewing it, I'll suddenly get distracted and just start rubbing it against my cheek because it just feels so nice, right? But people don't imagine that that's what wool could possibly be. Let's see. Takeda says, let's face it, the British and the US military used tropical weight wool, 100% wool for uniforms up until the 1980s. And those could be very comfortable even in the tropics. Yeah, yes. Thank you, Takeda. Thank you. Tropical mess dress. Ryan, as you know, my condottiero is a retired captain from the US Army, and he has tropical mess dress, which is the formal suit of clothing, the formal uniform for formal occasions, right? For balls and, you know, operas and whatnot. And it's made of wool and it's perfectly comfortable. It's meant for the tropics, right? Yep, 100% Takeda. Now, I know plenty of people who do medieval recreation who can't afford wool necessarily, or, you know, depending on where they are. And that's a different conversation. Wool has gotten very expensive these days because there are fewer and fewer mills that are actually making it. So yeah, that's a different conversation. And it is hard, I will grant you, it is much harder to thrift quality wool than it is to thrift quality linen. Because whereas bed sheets are meant to be against your skin, and therefore if you find linen bed sheets, they will be nice linen. A wool blanket is not meant to be against your skin. It's meant to be over top of a sheet, and you're supposed to be dressed in PJs. So yeah, it is definitely harder to thrift a nice silky smooth wool, and certainly harder to thrift tropical weight wool. I absolutely agree with that. Yep. Let me see. Takeda says, I think the move to use unnatural fibers for those really was more of a cost savings than a lack of fabric capability or desirability. Oh yeah, Takeda 100%. You know, someone once told me, you know, he couldn't, when he was in the army, you know, he had a problem with his wool socks because they would give him blisters. And I'm like, well, now they have synthetic socks that still give you blisters, but they make your feet stink and give you foot fungus. Yeah, the uniforms that the modern armed forces have are hideously synthetic, and even though they have flame retardant on them, once the flame retardant wears away, they are super flammable, and they do not breathe. They do not breathe at all. They are terrible for tropical climates. Summer here in Korea, wearing a U.S. Army I forget what they're calling them these days, but basically they're what we call their PJs, their fatigues, right? It's like you will just sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat. It's disgusting. Yeah. Whereas wool would actually breathe, but whatever. Obviously, it's modern. It's got to be better than what was before because obviously progress is a linear function in human civilization, right? It is not. Okay, so let's see. Any comments? So today we are going to be discussing frock flicks. We're going to be discussing, for those who don't know what a frock flick is, a frock flick is a movie or TV series or play that is a costume piece. It's a period piece, right? It's set in some historic period. And so ostensibly, it should have historical clothing. However, in the last 40 years, most so-called frock flicks do not have anything like historical clothing, especially not for the main characters, in particular, not if the historical version of clothing somehow fails the modern sexy clothing test. So today, the latest frock flick or frock show to come out, of course, the one that everyone's talking about and that's hitting all of the hashtags is Bridgerton, or as one of my followers calls it, Bridger boring. And I will admit that I hate watch Bridgerton. Have you hate watched Bridgerton at all, Mason?
No, but I do sometimes other things because yeah, not Bridgerton specifically, but
Oh, or do you like watch it? I'm sorry, I don't mean to. Do you actually enjoy watching Bridgerton, or have you not seen Bridgerton at all? It's going to be
I have not.
interesting. Well,
I have not seen it.
but how can you talk about the clothing if you haven't seen it?
I haven't watched the full thing. I've watched
Oh,
that's what I did for the past most of the day. I've gone
ah,
over different stuff from it, people talking about it, clips from it, all this different stuff. So
oh, got it. Okay,
that's what most
okay,
of my
yeah,
notes are too, actually, and then
yeah.
some facts too. And I made sure I
There,
had everything I needed to know, everything that So I'm prepared and I have everything I need.
Yeah, so well, I've been hate watching Bridgerton basically since it came out, and my condottiero will tell you that he frequently hears snorts of derision emanating from the area of the television whenever I'm watching it. I only watch it for workout entertainment because my resentment of the inaccuracies and my incredulity actually helps the workouts go more quickly. It distracts me from any discomfort from pushing my body, to the next level of fitness. Comment. My wife is amazed at how fast and deftly you can braid your hair so nicely. Oh, thank you. I am good with my fingers. I will admit that. And I used to braid show horses, the hair on show horses when I was growing up and doing the show circuit, the local show circuit. So that's actually where I taught myself to braid, was not on my hair, because at that time I wasn't allowed to have long hair. My mom didn't want me to have long hair because it would require effort to brush it. So I learned how to braid horses' hair. Okay, one last layer for me, and that's just to put on the kerchief that will then also hide this charming accessory upon my pate. Okay, kerchief. Now, certainly the headdresses and head coverings in Bridgerton are one of the things that make me the craziest, and the hair. Holy God, the hair. The hair is so bad. The hair is just so very bad. It's not even, it wouldn't even, for a lot of them, it wouldn't even be good hair at the Met Gala. If it's not going to even look good at the Met Gala, it shouldn't be on a fashionable lady in Regency, England either. Um, yeah, there's just some really really bad stuff. Let's see if we can. There we go.
I haven't
Yes.
watched. I haven't watched the full thing, of course, but from what I've seen, at least the time that's supposed to be now, why is Queen Charlotte wearing such an outdated form of dress for the Regency period?
Oh my God, Queen Charlotte. Yeah, this is. I I haven't seen an actual answer for that. It's because we have portraits of Queen Charlotte from the Regency era, and she's dressed fashionably like all the other ladies. She is wearing an Empire style dress in the neoclassical fashion, right? And her hair is in the neoclassical fashion. She's got kind of the swirly Grecian-esque gauzy veiling thing going on. Yeah, I've heard, so I suspect that it's because, if to be frank, the Rococo style dresses, gowns from the 1750s are visually impressive, shall we say, and they look powerful, right? They take up space, they create a sense of grandeur that the much more natural line styles of the 1810s, the 1800s and the 1810s just don't take up that kind of space, right? So I suspect that's what they were going for. But no, Queen Charlotte was not still wearing panniers in the 1800s or the 1810s. They were gone, except for one exception. Have you seen what the actual court debutante dresses should have looked like in this era? Have you?
Yes.
Did you see a depiction of it? They are terrible. They're so ugly. The real ones. The debutantes, the court dresses in this era, the formal court dresses, were a combination of the Empire style dress with panniers coming out from the mid rib cage. Basically, it is the most ridiculous looking garment possibly in the history of the world, and I mean that seriously. I have studied historical garments across the globe, and in my opinion, the official court debutante dress in that era is the dumbest looking one. It's ridiculous. And those panniers stayed part of the court debutante dress for a long time, even into the 1920s, I think. So, yeah, it's a pretty ridiculous look. Yeah. Oh, Tanya Roden says it's to depict that she was a traditionalist. I mean, there's a difference between being a traditionalist and so out of fashion that you would be laughed out of your own court.
Plus, she's the queen consort. She wouldn't be dressed in a fashion that's completely out of date. That's just
yeah. So Tanya says her comment is she read that during the Regency, people in England wore panniers because of Queen Charlotte and not the Empire dress. No. See, Tanya, they did both. They wore the Empire style dress over panniers for official court functions, but Queen Charlotte did not wear those panniers outside of official court functions. We have lots of portraits from her from the 1800s and the 1810s, and she's just a fashionably dressed woman. No one except for like really old women maybe were still dressing that way, but I've not even seen any real depictions of very elderly women in the 1800s and 1810s still wearing the 1750 style dress, because the panniers were out of fashion by the 1790s. Like they weren't, and even the 1780s, they had the panniers, those are gone. The side panniers are gone. The silhouette had gone to a big butt, not big hips, basically. Yeah. So no, she may have been a traditionalist, but she still wasn't wearing 1750s Rococo fashions in the 1800s. You can see that. Just look up portraits of Queen Charlotte from the 1800s and 1810s. But then also, everyone, if you want to see it, Google actual Regency era debutante dress panniers, and then you will see what I'm talking about. It's real ugly. Yeah. Okay. Yes, go on.
Now, it's the Regency. It's called the Regency because George's son, who's future George IV, is, of course, acting regent because, as you know, George, the bouts of insanity. But does he even... Now, I don't know too much about the show, but does he play much of a role, if any at all? Because by now, he is essentially, one of the more important... Well, he's always been important, but he's the regent, right?
Yes. Yeah. So George, who would become the fourth, was a figure of massive ridicule. He was obese. He had an obese mistress. He was decadent. He spent way too much money. The people hated him. And his manners were poor. Yeah, Charlotte kind of despaired about him. He behaved very, and yeah, he actually, basically flaunted his mistress out in public settings, which was not on in this time. He was there. He was playing a role, and he was getting flogged for it by the media at the time. There's so many fantastic satirical plates that have survived about the prince, the crown prince, who would become the Prince of Wales. Basically, he was the Prince of Wales at this time, right? About the Regent. If you want to see a fantastic, so everyone's always asking me, so what are the good series to watch for accurate costuming? Blackadder is your baby. And Blackadder has a Regency season 3 of Blackadder is the Regency. And what most people don't realize is there were several regencies, actually, because George III kept coming in and out of competency, shall we say.
Yeah.
And so there's more than one regency period. And the Blackadder Regency Regency season is fantastic because it's Hugh Laurie, who's tall and slender, playing the flatulent and fatuous and adipose Prince Regent. So it's kind of it's doubly a joke. And of course, Rowan Atkinson plays his very wily manservant. So yeah, I can highly recommend season 3 of Blackadder. And they very in season 3 they intentionally do certain things incorrectly as part of the satire, right? Like they'll make things bigger or more absurd than they would really have been, but that's because it's a satire. So yeah, the Prince Regent is absolutely playing a role in this era. And it's funny because in Bridgerton, he's absent. He's entirely absent. She references, it's only in the series, I think it's only in the Splinter series, Queen Charlotte, where they actually show the children, right? All of her children. I think that wasn't in the mainline Bridgerton series. Anyway, there's only like one time you ever get to see the Prince Regent, and just like in Bridgerton, there's bizarrely, seemingly no real Napoleonic War happening, even though it occasionally gets referenced. It's only in season 4 that I remember actually seeing some officers walking around, actually. So yeah, that's another weird thing, which is why some people actually will just outright say, no, this isn't a historically based series. It's a complete fantasy. So we don't have to care at all about the clothing, because if it were really historically based, then we would have, a lot more talk about the war in France and Napoleon, and there'd be talk of soldiers coming in and out of the city and that, attending the assemblies. So that's one defense I've heard of Bridgerton. Team of Tosh, welcome. Welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, George IV was, I won't add to it, but he was extremely hated, and some remark that he could have potentially been cause to the potential end of the monarchy it's had, because, I mean, by the end of his reign, he's not just morbidly obese, he's also an alcoholic and partially blind. He is not a good king. He spends a lot. In fact, he gets married because his dad's like, well, you're in more debt than you earn in money in a year. I'll pay it off to marry her. But if I'm not mistaken, was he not married already?
Oh yeah, no, he was. Yeah, and he had to set that. Yeah, because he had a morganatic marriage, right? He went against his father and contracted a morganatic marriage. A morganatic marriage is one in which generally a king or crown prince marries a woman who is not of the right station, and the understanding is that if any children they have will not be in line for the throne, right? And he did that completely against his father's. Like, his father forbade it, and he did it anyway in secret. So yeah, he had to divorce her. He had to divorce his first wife. Yeah. And he never gave his new princess, he never gave her a chance, right? He humiliated her at every turn. She showed up for their coronation and he shut the doors on her. He had the doors shut against her for their coronation. This is post Bridgerton, mind you, right? This is after the Regency. But yeah, he was an asshole. He was a terrible, terrible person. He is what happens when a child is raised thinking they are the center of the universe because they are the crown prince,
Yeah.
And not actually taught any sort of humility or modesty.
And especially when it comes to his spendings, far cry
Oh, God.
his father, because if I'm mistaken, George III, I think it was like 3 coats a year, and
Yeah,
then George
yeah.
died. Then George
Yeah.
died. I like that. That's mine now. I like that too. That's mine now. Okay.
Yeah,
And like,
yeah, it's the usual like action reaction situation. So you have the case of George III, who's extremely frugal, which isn't bad per se, but he's so frugal that he also gets mocked by his people for being so frugal that he wears garments that need patches. There is actually a satirical a cartoon depicting Charlotte and George sitting in a room where most of the furniture is covered in sheets. And their clothes are all like have patches and very obvious repairs all over them. So his frugality, his excessive frugality, was also considered a problem by his own people. So that's why, and that actually leads us to the first Queen Charlotte's ball, which was held in 1780. And it was George put it on. This was obviously in one of his periods of lucidity. He hosted this ball because he wanted to show his people that he could in fact spend a little money in an appropriately kingly fashion. Yeah, and one of his nicknames was Farmer George because he actually did have his own little farm and he actually worked it. Like he would have been much happier as a country squire, I feel like, than as the King of England, honestly.
George III's story honestly makes me kind of sad with
Very
his
sad.
mental problems and
Yeah,
some of the stuff he does and says.
Yeah, it's his honestly, he and his and Charlotte, it is a very sad story. And what's the worst part is if he lived now, if he were now the King of England, we could probably treat the underlying causes of his periods of madness, as it were. There's some theories that it was porphyria. There's some theories that it was schizophrenia, right?
Yeah.
But no matter what, it's likely that we could at least treat it so that he could have a happier, more stable life.
If I'm mistaken, was it his daughter or who died?
Yeah. Lotte died. Yeah, it was his favorite daughter. Yeah.
And during one of his bouts, I think it was his last one, he doesn't remember that she's dead. And he believed she was gone to a palace somewhere or something. I don't remember, but he doesn't remember she's dead. And
yeah, it's really sad. That's actually that scene is actually depicted. I think I don't know if it's in Bridgerton or in Charlotte's the split off series Charlotte. Which, by the way, the costuming in Queen Charlotte is far superior to Bridgerton and far more accurate. So annoying that they show us that they can do that, in fact, but just choose not to in Bridgerton. It's irritating. But actually, I honestly, I can really highly recommend the series Charlotte. It's not the vapid, sad, ghost of a romance that Bridgerton is. It's actually much more deep and much more profound and addresses a lot of really important topics. Can highly recommend. I think you'll enjoy it. I really think you will. Now, let me see. Tea with Tosh says, do you know King Peter II of Brazil? He was a hipster and quite an interesting character. I do, Tea with Tosh. 19th century Brazilian history is very interesting. Most people don't realize that Brazil was for a time a rebel, sort of a rebel kingdom, rebel empire, set itself up to be in contrast to the Kingdom of Portugal because of characters like Peter. Yeah, Brazilian history is very interesting. It's wild. It's a wild ride. Yeah. Takeda says, good comment. George IV largely changed the way that the crown could buy things, leading to the now old warrant system. Since during George IV's era, the merchants could not really refuse to let a major noble or royal take something. Yeah, it was kind of one of the things against which we protested in the colonies. Rightfully protested, I would like to add. I don't necessarily agree with all of the so-called reasoning for the American Revolution, but that aspect of it was definitely wrong. And being allowed to just quarter soldiers in your house is also wrong. Okay, so let me see. Ben Deho says, oh, well, thank you, Ben Deho. That's really sweet of you, but don't do that, please. Okay, so everyone, are we ready for the Gettys? We're going to pause on Bridgerton for a moment. I would like to take you back to an earlier time in British royal history. We're going to travel back to the sort of end of the first quarter of the 16th century to the court of Henry VIII, and we're going to get a getting dressed. And Mason is going to demonstrate all the layers from the skin out, and will hopefully explain to us little details about each layer. And if you have questions as we go along with the the Henrician getting dressed process, then pop them in the live chat. So let me just change the screens so that you can see Mason and not so much me. Okay.
Now there are a few.
There we go. Okay.
There are a few very minor, I'd say inaccuracies, but mostly because I still have a few things I have to do, but none of them will affect it visually.
Mm-hmm.
So, see, I think I'm gonna start with my shoes because I find once I have my jerkin on, I don't like bending down as much because it won't, but I'm nervous I'll end up breaking it.
Yes, no problem. So actually, this is something I recommend too when getting dressed in any era before the modern era, is that you put your shoes on before you put on a restrictive garment if you don't have a valet or a damsel to assist you. Okay, good. So can you show us your shoes a little more close to the camera, please? Very nice.
Now, these are very much different from how we would think of shoes that we wear today. I could get a pair of what I wear. Point out some differences. But one thing is, it's very flat, much more flat than we would think of shoes today on the bottom.
Right.
I don't know how to describe in a way that makes sense if you haven't worn these, but when you first get these, you have to wear them for a good while and not take them off, just so it will fit your foot a bit better.
Right.
And it's honestly, as it was described by Liverpool National Museum, they are surprisingly plain almost for the time. Now, there's different ways you can do it. They could be bright colors, and the slashings could have a different color underneath. Like one of the guys I talked to about this, John S. White, some of you may know him as King Henry VIII of that name. He does live shows as Henry VIII. His, I believe, are red, or no, they're black, I think, with red in the slashings. So this can be done a lot of times.
And wait. And so, question about the slashing: is the slashing documentable from portraits or from extant shoes?
I normally have so yeah. There are not a whole lot of portraits where we actually see shoes. Well, for men, we have some. This and one of Henry's portraits. I don't know the name of it, actually. I'm pretty sure it's Holbein, though. It's one of the most iconic.
That's a good guess. Henry's court.
If it's one of Henry's portraits, it's more likely than not, safe guess to say Holbein. So he has ones almost exactly like this. There's a different color. And we know that there were, specifically amongst, Richard Arthur, who have some sort of slashing. It's no different from how some other items of clothing you will have slashing, and so you can see stuff beneath it. Like you've seen a lot of portraits, especially with like Henry, his jerkin, it's slashed, and you have the bits of linen showing through.
Right.
Pluckings, I believe the term would be. So we know slashing is in clothing, and we have some portraits of where the shoes are visible. And yeah. Now we don't see much.
So wait, what did you call them? Tuckings? What we now call the slashes and the poofs?
The pluckings is the term I call them.
Pluckings. Very nice.
So we don't know much about women's shoes. Oh, we do, but we don't have many portraits where you can actually see them. Most, from what we know, it's unlikely they're much different from this. We know, I believe, Catherine Parr, Henry VI's wife. I believe it was 47, I believe, pairs of shoes she owned. She's quite fond of them.
That's excessive. That is crazy.
Yeah.
That's Imelda Marcos excessive in this era. Jesus, that's a lot of shoes.
Yeah. So get my shoes on, and I'll show you what I have on now. Now I did cheat a little. I have my bed shirt on underneath this, but that's because I don't have a pair of braids or any other undergarments, and I'd rather not accidentally flash the camera.
Yes, no, I'd rather. I don't want my channel to be banned, so I think that's a brilliant plan. So there's a question. Hey, do you speak French? Moi, oui, je parle français. Je ne sais pas si Mason aussi parle. Do you speak French, Mason?
I'm not fluent. I can speak a little bit. I'm not exactly what you. I couldn't. I live in Canada, so we are kind of forced to learn French here.
Forced. French is a beautiful language. Everyone should learn it.
But because in Quebec they speak French more than they do. It's not even exactly the same French thing when in France, although in the rest of the provinces, I do believe we learn like French, like actual, not Quebec French. Another one of the reasons a lot of Canadians have issues with Quebec is the French, but yeah.
Well, in fairness, the French that they are speaking in Quebec is a bizarre combination of 17th century French that has been modernized. So they actually still pronounce things the way French used to be pronounced in the royal court of Louis XIV. So that's why they say things like "ouais" instead of "oui." Because they're actually pronouncing the OUI sound in the old way. So it's, yeah. Yeah, I mean, the reason that Quebec is French speaking and the rest of Canada is English speaking has to do with 18th century warfare. Yeah.
The part of Canada I live on, you can tell who settled where, who conquered where because of the names. I live in Newfoundland, anyone wondering. So we are, I believe, the furthest most eastern point of Canada in Newfoundland. So the English had most of us. The French and the English kind of went back and forth trying to keep most of us because our fisheries, right? Now we're discovered in the time of Henry VII. So Henry VII employs Giovanni Caboto, or as we call him, John Cabot, the English version.
Yeah.
And he sets out. He gets here. He's not the first person here ever, but he gets here, and we're not entirely sure how we got our name, Newfoundland. Which yes, it's Newfoundland, not Newfoundland, not Newfoundland.
I have to correct my European friends about that all the time. Philip from Irish Medieval History, he always pronounces it Newfoundland, and I'm like, no, Newfoundland.
Yeah, it's Newfoundland. Yeah, people refuse to pronounce it right.
Yeah.
And you can also tell the accents too. A lot of Irish immigrants came here during the potato famine.
Yep.
So there's a lot of our accent. Some places it's actually faster. Sometimes it's different. It's different across. And our names, like I said, city names also reflect who was where. Like a lot of places have French names. We have a place called Portugal Cove, which is named because of the Portuguese who were there. And we have, so it's kind of mixed. And they're coming back and forth because Henry VII, it's actually a legend. I'm not saying this is fact, but it's a legend that we got our name because when Henry VII supposedly heard that they told him, like, yeah, we found some new land. The first thing he said was Newfoundland. And they were like, well, that's the name.
Yeah.
I doubt, which sounds kind of like, wow, because that's such a good thing to name us.
Yes, well, place names are often, honestly, if you look at English place names, by which I mean place names in England, they're very obvious. It's, it's some city on this body of water or some city on the hill or under the hill or near the hill. It's always very practical, not necessarily the most creative. Okay, back to getting you dressed. So.
Okay. So I have. So can you see my, because, actually, can you hear me? Yes, you can. So I have.
come to forward to your, because I'm blocking you, so move a little bit to your right. I think it's your right. Are you mirrored? Which is your right and which is your left? Hold up your right hand.
That's my right.
Okay, move to your right.
No, wouldn't it be? Yeah.
Move to your right. Move to your right. And move the more to your right. I am blocking you. You are off camera. Move the opposite direction. Whatever direction you're going, go the opposite direction of that. Okay, keep going. Keep going.
Let me move my table. My table with a bunch of stuff. There we go. That should be good. Is it in frame now?
Yes, you are in frame now.
So I really shouldn't be putting my leg on my foot on this, but I have my stockings. I have a ribbon holding up said stockings. I have a red one on this one, and I have a blue one on this one. This one I have yet to embroider. I have to embroider it with Aniswa, Kimali Pons, which is, I believe, evil be to he who thinks it, is one of the many translations. There's many variations, depending on who you ask. But I have to embroider that. And this is, I believe you said the correct term will be smock. I've always called it a shift, because that's what everyone else in the same community as I tends to call it, but smock will be the correct term, right?
Yes, or shirta. Shirta is also for men's garments. For men's garments in the 16th century, you see the word shirta or shirta. That is starting to come in for men.
Now, I do have my bed shirt underneath this, mostly because, well, the shift isn't very long, and I kind of don't want to accidentally flash the camera. I think we'd all rather it that way, too.
YouTube would certainly cancel my channel, so let's not go there.
Now, here's the thing. I do have to wear suspenders. Now, this, from what I've seen, this is the hose. These are, I believe the term that I've heard used for these would be balloon hose. Now, these become more of a bigger as the Tudor era goes on. So by the Elizabethan point, you see these comically large, but this would be connected to the jerkin by ties, which I don't have on these yet. I have to do that, but I am a little bit scared I will make a mistake. And yeah, I have my cod piece, which I finally fixed up and reattached on this. So get these on.
Yeah, so the hosen, the term balloon hosen is a modern costumer term. They were just called hosen in this era. So a lot of modern costumers want to specify garments by shape and type, because we like to categorize and classify things. But the reality is that historically there weren't necessarily as refined a vocabulary for it because there didn't need to be.
Yeah. And same with what we call English hoods or gable hoods. They were called bonnets and frontlets.
Yes, exactly.
I will admit, I am kind of thankful we have modern terms for some of this stuff, because sometimes it's just nice to be able to, have a good term you can use and have no confusion.
Yeah, it's just, in the era of any given fashion, there wasn't confusion because that was what was being worn. It just, if you said hosen, everyone knew what those were because that's what people were wearing. Yeah, it's a different world. So when I'm actually what I call in persona, I avoid all of those modern costumer terms like the plague. And sometimes it confuses people, but I'm hoping to also educate people in that way about the proper terminology, because then when you read the original sources, you'll get confused because those terms aren't there, right? Balloon hosen isn't there. I don't even know about, actually, I can't speak about the word pantaloon, but shift isn't there. You'll never see the word shift. If you see the word corset in a medieval source, it is not what you think it is, what we think it is modernly, rather. If you see the word gown, it is also not what we think it is. So, it's important. That's why it's important, I think, to actually understand the proper terminology from the period, because if you ever start doing research on your own, you're going to be very confused.
I forgot to mention, I have black work on my cuffs. Now, it's a bit debated when this came over to England. because we know when it starts popping up. We don't know exactly who. It's a lot of historians will say that Catherine of Aragon brought it or popularized it. Popularized it in England. She also brings the I believe it's a Spanish farthingale, another thing she brought over, which is later repopularized by Catherine Parr, who is enough.
Yeah, the verdruga, as it's called in Spanish, is actually invented. What you called the farthingale is actually invented in Spain in the mid 15th century. And there's a theory that it was invented to hide an illegitimate pregnancy of the Queen of Valencia, who had gotten pregnant by her lover. And so she actually started wearing a high-waisted gown with this verdruga to keep the skirt suspended away from her growing belly. And she started having her own ladies in waiting dress that way. And then that fashion spread. It's really weird looking.
Okay, now before I put my next layer on, this is my jerkin.
Okay, wait, question. There's a question. What am I doing? I am doing something called finger loop braiding. So I have long loops of, in this case, hemp yarn around my fingers, and I'm actually braiding a cord out of it. So that's why I'm moving back and forth, because you have to open your hands up to tighten the braid once you make the pattern by manipulating the loops. So that's what I'm doing. What I'm making will be cords, will be points, as they would be called in the period, with which Mason could and should attach his hosen to his doublet. Yeah. Although apparently yours does not actually attach to it. How do your hosens stay up if they don't attach to your doublet?
Currently, I do use modern suspenders, although
Mason.
I know,
suspenders.
Funny story. I get them right, and because I didn't make these, because I want to make more stuff. I can't find any good patterns. I don't have to print off, which is a problem because I don't have enough material. But I get them, and they don't quite fit on the back, and so I can't properly put them on. So I have to use these to keep them up. I'm hoping soon to actually have it so I can attach the hosen to the jerkin. Funny story, actually. I get these suspenders the day I have a radio interview where I want to show up in costume, which is on my channel, by the way, if anyone's interested. Because my local radio station, I did an interview, and so I had to get these because I didn't buy new ones yet, and I'm hoping to just add ties now. But at the point, I hadn't thought of that, right? I hadn't known. This was like last July. So
yeah. So for those who don't know, up until the 17th century, men tied their hosen, which are exactly like you think they are. They are like, you hear the word pantyhose. That word hose is the same word. Men were also wearing stockings that came up to their hips and waist. And by the 14th century, those are being tied to the cote, C-O-T-E, the doublet, the pourpoint, by points, by laces, so that they stay up. And it is until the court of Charles II that continues to be the way that hosen, that what we would modernly refer to as pants, are kept upon one's body. So suspenders are definitely a much more like a 19th century invention, I think. But yeah, so that's why what I'm doing is actually very important, because men and women use laces to hold their garments together and on their body and secure things in large numbers. Also pins. Is there nothing on your garments? You don't have anything that you have to pin to hold in place, or are there some cheats that have been undertaken that have eliminated the need for pins?
There's not much I've ever really had to pin. There are some things that are typically connected with ties that I didn't, like my codpiece. It's supposed to be attached with ties. I kind of cheated. I stitched it on, mostly because I didn't really have a good way to tie them on. Again, I need to add spots for points. I'm just honestly a bit scared I might mess up and accidentally ruin them. And then
nonsense. Then you just have extra holes. I have a tutorial, by the way. I have a tutorial on the Creative Contessa, my channel, that shows you how to make a proper lacing eyelet. So if you follow that tutorial, you will be fine.
So I'm in my next stage of dress. I have to make sure that I actually have this done right. There we go. Okay. Now I hope you all can see.
We can.
Okay. So fix my sash. I have the most trouble with my sash. I find it won't stay on properly. There we go.
Yeah,
Okay.
some good comments here. You look like a king, bro. Save some drip for the rest of us. Not even enough fair maidens available. Good style. Let me see if I missed any comments.
Now I don't.
Mason, Takeda has a question. What are the garments you're putting on now? So I think he's referring to the last layer that you put over top of your hosen and doublet.
So this. The only term I've ever heard used for this, as it is a gender neutral term, as I've said before, a kirtle. It's not the same as a women's garment, very much
Mm-hmm.
not. This is not an undergarment, this goes over. This is what covers now. Usually it can also cover the codpiece. I'm not doing that at the moment, my codpiece is out, but yeah. So this goes on next. And it also mostly covers the hosen for the most part. And you will notice that a lot of productions now, they have it done as one piece. It is not. It is
Right.
very much two separate pieces. Now,
Yep.
a lot of people who wear the clothing now, they do that, and it's just. I made a joke to my friend once. It's a big fabric trying to get more money out of you.
Right. Well, in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, fabric was the biggest industry in Europe. It really was. And for England, it was wool, right? Wool was the big export, the way in which England made all of its money, really.
So next, I'm gonna go over my jewelry. Now,
Okay, question. Wait, question. Just joining the stream. Is this, do these styles reflect the 1520s to 1540s?
yes. So there are some minor adjustments over that period of time. I use this for all three, but I will do things to change up the style. Henry's jewelry changes a fair bit. You see, he gets more and more. Because he is portraiture, he tries to be more and more intimidating as he goes on. When realistically, he is aging, he is severely obese, he is just not in good health.
Right.
And he does in his portraits. What he does is he tries to make himself seem more like commanding, more manly, more threatening, more fearing, and it's about that period. I mostly do 1530s, 1540s.
Mm-hmm.
Now I've gone as far as to the end of his life. I've gone as early as probably late 1510s, but things do change. But this is definitely good for the 1520s to 1540s. Now, when it comes to my jewelry, I don't have my chain of office. Well, I don't know if that's the proper term to use for it. That's what I call it when I'm trying to my big chain for all the jewels. It broke, so I got a new one coming hopefully next week. Fingers crossed. I desperately need it. But in the meantime, I wear a gold chain. I do put some pearls on because you've seen a lot of his collars. He will wear them. And my most important part of this jewelry, much like the garter I still have to embroider, this is my pendant of St. George. Now, St. George is the patron saint of England, right? So
could you show it? Could you show it closer to the camera and just hold it for like 5 seconds so people can see it? Make sure I'm not covering it. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah. See, isn't that gorgeous, everyone? Isn't she beautiful?
I got this from Armor and Castings.
Yeah.
After he recommended it to me, I checked it out and I saw this. I was like, I need this because I kind of do.
So for those, if you would like similar bling, armorandcastings.com. They are a channel sponsor. If you enter the code Contessa10, you will get a 10% discount. Their products are amazing.
Yeah, I went into that kind of blind, and I am really happy with how good quality this is. So you can trust us both, and I say you will not regret it. And so this is an important piece of the regalia of the Order of the Garter. So Henry, as the King of England, he is the sovereign of that order. That is still, I believe, one of the highest orders in the land. There's no more than, I believe, 26 knights any time. And so
and guess who was recently ejected from the Order of the Garter?
Was it Andrew Mountbatten Windsor?
Yes, it was. Andrew was ejected from the Order of the Garter. Oh, yeah, I know. What a mess. What a mess. Anyway, go on. Back to the 16th century. Order of the
But
Garter.
yeah. So I'm like I said earlier, I'm yet to embroider it, but the actual garter itself, blue thing I have here, it's supposed to say "Ani soit qui mal y pense," which is the what I say motto, I believe would be a good term
It
of
is.
the
It
order.
is. So it's actually been the motto of the order since its founding in the 14th
Yeah,
century. Honi soit qui mal y pense.
yeah.
It literally means shame on those who think evil about it. And there's a really fun origin. Have you heard the apocryphal origin story as to why the Order of the Garter has that name?
I have not. No.
It's a really fun one, and it actually originates, the apocryphal origin story of Honi soit qui mal y pense dates back to the 15th century. So it's actually an appropriate rumor for me to have heard about. So the story goes that Edward III, the King of England who founded the Order of the Garter, he was hosting one of his many balls. He was a big cosplayer. He really liked Arthurian cosplay. And the Countess of Salisbury was dancing. And while she was dancing, her garter at this ball, and apparently there was some rumor about the Countess of Salisbury and Edward III having a thing. And her garter falls off because women also have to wear garters. Men and women wearing garters, everyone wore garters because they held up your stockings. Right? Everyone wore them. And they helped keep them from sagging below your knees. So she was dancing and her garter came off. By the way, that happens to me all the time. My medieval garters come off at least once a day on their own from the vigor of activity, especially dancing. So her garter comes off, and the king picks it up and hands it back to her. And apparently, this causes a big scandal. There's this scuttle starts spreading about amongst the court that it's actually a sign that the Countess of Salisbury is actually Edward III's lover, and that they're having this illicit affair. And so, according to the apocryphal tale, he actually shames his courtiers by saying, "Honi soit qui mal y pense." Right? So shame on you for thinking evil about this situation. That's not what's happening. So I don't have any 14th century sources for that. The story originates in the 15th century, but it's a fun story. It's a fun story anyway. Okay, hold on a minute. Compliment. That is definitely a rad outfit. I agree. Men should dress like this more often. Takeda says, garters, a belt for your socks before they were elastic or mechanical knit weaves. 100% Takeda. How do I start cosplay? That's a hard conversation for a different live stream. Comment is, it's a lovely story. Mr. Andrew Windsor gets a poop emoji, as he should. Let me see. Tea with Tosh comments that the patron saint of England, St. George slaying the dragon, is actually very important in Afro-Brazilian religions, which is interesting. Let me see. That is an amazing piece. Okay. Nevis says, yeah, in the process of assembling a 1530s outfit myself. Nevis, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. And then there's a question from Larry Thompson, who's hailing from London. Welcome, Larry. Thank you for joining us. Everyone, if you're enjoying this live stream, our Frockflix chat with getting dressed and random historical fashion and history talk, please like and subscribe. Larry says, do you guys know about the clans in Scotland by any chance? Larry, could you narrow that question down a little bit? What are you talking, when you say the clans, do we know anything about the clans in Scotland? Are you talking about how the clans functioned in the Middle Ages? Or are you talking about clothing? That's a super broad question. And the answer is, I know some things, specific aspects about medieval Scotland, better than other aspects of medieval Scotland. I'm not certain if, Mason, do you have any particular knowledge or expertise about medieval Scotland?
Not medieval Scotland, no. I know, no, not medieval specifically. I know some stuff about you can't exactly study Tudor England, without talking about Scotland at the time, because they kind of like France and England for a lot of history. You kind of can't look
Right.
into one without looking at the other.
Right. So true.
Scotland in Tudor England was very important because Henry VII, sorry, but Henry VII takes the throne. Now he marries his daughter Margaret to James V. I believe James V, I believe, or fifth.
Yes.
Fourth, I'm pretty sure. Fourth.
You're talking. Wait, you're talking which James? You're talking about James V of Scotland, James the First of England.
No,
James. No, sorry, James the Sixth. You're not talking about in the Elizabethan era. James the Sixth of Scotland, James the First. You're talking about right. That's James the Fifth. James the Fourth is in the 15th century.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she marries James V, and then James. So when Henry's on one of his campaigns in France, James invades England. Now,
He does.
As you know, Catherine of Aragon is the regent, and the English armies defeat the Scottish, and it kills James.
Yep.
And this leads to the whole thing about Margaret's, who's going to be regent for her son, all this stuff. But yeah, England and Scotland, and there's the rough wooing later on when Henry starts attacking Scotland, being like, Mary, who becomes Queen of Scots, should marry my son Edward. And then, of course, Mary ends up getting married to Francis II of France. And then that's a whole other story. Like, I could do a whole stream on Mary, Queen of Scots specifically.
Yeah.
Crazy life. Crazy life.
Yeah, England and Scotland are tightly bound together, and not in the way that a lot of modern nationalists like to portray it. Right? Scotland was in many ways its own powerful kingdom. It often allied itself with not England. It often allied itself with, various Denmark. Denmark was a common medieval ally of Scotland. France, Burgundy. They, depending on the era in question. But in my opinion, the reason, Catherine of Aragon leading the armies to go and oust Scotland, James V's forces, is one of the pieces of evidence for her being what I call the last medieval queen of England. Right? There is very little more medieval than a queen standing in for her king who's off campaigning somewhere else, leading the armies while she's pregnant and winning. Right,
Catherine's life too. I could do a whole stream about that too.
Yeah,
her life is just so eventful, so much. She is, at least in my opinion, she's a really strong woman, and definitely deserved much better than what she got.
Yeah, she is. Catherine of Aragon is probably should be one of the most admired women in history, honestly. Because of every challenge she faced, starting from the death of Arthur, right? From the point that Arthur dies is where things start getting hard for her, because her asshole father-in-law, Henry VII, refuses to actually provide her with enough income to support herself. So she's wearing rags and going hungry, and her asshole father, Fernando, because her mother's dead at that point, won't support her either. And so both of them keep saying, well, actually, it's your father-in-law's job to provide you with enough income to not live like a pauper. And, her father-in-law says, no, it's your father's job to do that, right? And that's why marrying Henry was such a great thing for her, right? Yeah, no, Catherine of Aragon, what an amazing woman. What an amazing woman. Okay, let me just see about the comments here.
After the comments, I will finish putting on my...
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Let me see. I never knew the other militaries did. They always look like... Oh, okay, wait. Clearly, this is a continuation. Larry Thompson sent specifying his question. The colors of tartan that each clan owns, Clan Thompson disbanded by the crown. You would look amazing with a kilt and shirt. So, Larry Thompson, I have a 2-minute video that talks about the history of the kilt and what we now call tartans. The reality is that in the Middle Ages and Renaissance, there are no clan tartans, not like we understand it. The clan tartan system doesn't come about until the early 19th century, and kilts, like we understand them, as in a pleated skirt-like garment, that is an invention of the 18th century. the thing that becomes the great kilt starts off as a cloak, a rectangular cloak that is just wrapped around the body. And then at the end of the 19th century, and I mean the 19th century, the end of the 16th century is when they belt that cloak, which is called a plaid, by the way, in Scots. And then that's adopted into Gaelic in the 16th century. That plaid is belted on the outside for the first time towards the second half of the 16th century. But it's still not arranged into those neat pleats until the 17th century, and it doesn't become what we call the small kilt until the 18th century. So yeah, it's wouldn't be an appropriate set of clothing for Mason in the 16th century. And in fact, in the 16th century in Scotland, even in the Highlands, the men were wearing doublets and hosen. Usually they would roll their stockings down actually to expose their knees, but over top of their doublets and their hosen, they would wear the plaid. So this idea of a Scotsman just wearing a shirt and a blanket basically wrapped around him and belted, not historically documentable. Sorry, everyone. Okay.
So,
Okay, let's go on to your jewelry.
So we've gone over, I've got some rings on. These are not anything particularly important. These are some things I have lying around. I've got to get some more. It's I've lost a lot of my rings. But one thing I want to talk about, one way you can tell a lot about Henry is his hair. For his youth, I believe it was 1511, I believe it was the Venetian ambassador reports he has his hair combed forth in the French style, and that he would make a pretty woman. I believe it was the Venetian ambassador. And he writes that the King Henry will make a very pretty woman. Yeah. So Henry's hair, and then yeah. So on similar topic here, I have my coif. This is one thing actually I wear to kind of tell what year of Henry I'm in. The later I am with Henry, if I'm in the 1540s, a lot of the time I will wear my coif. Because I find it helps. I also have another outfit I wear. It's darker, and I also wear that when I'm doing my older Henry. I'm not wearing this today. I'm going for a more young Henry today, more 1530s pre-jousting incident. And when I also have my older Henry, I have this. It's just a walking staff. It has a puffin on top, which for Henry, I don't know, but I have it. It works, and it looks good with the outfit. Because, of course, Henry, by 1541, he is stuck using a stick. He has to help use him to walk. He's pain bad, really, and eventually he just can't walk. He actually spends his last 8 days in bed. He just can't get up, and he actually dies before he can properly give his final service. So he squeezes. It was Archbishop Cranmer, I believe, is at his bedside, and he can't. He's not awake. And Cranmer reports Henry squeezed his hand, and that was his way of accepting all the stuff, and that was his way of the final. Can I believe the final communion?
Extreme unction is the term. So last rites. You're thinking of last rites.
Last rites.
Yeah.
Last rites.
Yeah, so that's the sacrament called extreme unction. And see, that's the thing most people don't realize is that Henry's Reformation Church was Catholic in every way except for the Pope. Basically, it's Catholic with the king as the Pope. Everything else is the same. So it's not, his Reformation Church was not very reforming, shall we say, which is why Anne Boleyn came in with these crazy Huguenot ideas. Right? She had some real revolutionary reformationist ideas, and that may have also gotten her into trouble, honestly. Yeah. What's that lady doing? I am doing something that is called lace making in 15th century English, but that we now call finger loop braiding. So there are loops of linen, this is hemp. Loops of hemp yarn around my fingers, and I'm basically braiding them in and out of each other in a specific pattern to produce a cord that will then be used to hold armor on garments for a 15th century knight to be able to dress properly for battle.
So, when you're mentioning the Henry's Reformation, people like to have this claim he was Protestant. He is not. Protestants are being arrested and executed for heresy.
Yep.
Roman Catholics also. If you don't accept the King's head of the Church, heretic. Oh, you're Protestant,
Yep.
heretic. Henry
Yep.
still does not like Martin Luther. He does
Nope.
not like the Lutheran Reformation. But the term we would use now he would have said he was Catholic, right? But the term we use now is Reformed Catholic. But they would not say that. They would have said, yeah, I'm Catholic. Henry was Catholic. He's a Catholic. He does all the stuff. And not much really changes till Edward VI, who was not Catholic.
Not Catholic.
But Henry was not exactly the head of the Church of England. He was the head of the Church in England. And you see that in documents. He's the head of the Church in England.
Yep.
And
therefore doesn't have to bow to the authority of the Pope.
Exactly. Everyone's still Catholic. We still have they still have Catholic, like, it's basic Catholicism, but not the Pope. And he dissolves the monasteries. And conveniently enough, that lines up with his war in France when he spent most of the country's money on materials to go fight. Then he melts stuff down, sells stuff, and all of a sudden he has enough money to go to war with France.
It is an interesting coincidence. And also, this actually will tie us back to Bridgerton, that the dissolution of the monasteries under Henry VIII is one of the reasons that so many estates by the Regency era England are called such and such abbey, because the abbeys were dissolved and those properties were then ultimately sold off to or given to members of the aristocracy. So that's why suddenly people are owning these abbeys and living in them or on them, including Dracula. Because during the English Reformation, Henry dissolved all of those monastic communities and, used them as a source of income. Yeah. Okay. Comments or questions? I would make a good king. Everyone thinks that until they get the power, and then it all goes to shit. Okay. Let me see. I still don't know who Mason is. However, it's good to see younger people getting into history. Okay, who is Mason? Mason is a Tudor enthusiastic and a recreationist, and he actually reached out to me to start collaborating he wanted to interview me on his channel, and so we have started a collaboration. So yeah, Mason is basically the young male version of me. Yeah, so that is who Mason is. And Mason's channel, what is the official title of your channel?
King Henry's Royal Court.
King Henry's Royal Court, right? So King Henry's Royal Court. You should check out his channel if you're watching from my channel, from the Creative Contessa, right? So his focus is on Henry VIII, Tudor England, basically.
Yeah. I also do a lot of work with different historians. I don't talk as much now, but Claire Ridgway, I did an interview with her back in July, and I still talk to her. Which is great to have people in the community. I've talked to a lot of different people in the community. I've talked to Natalie Gruinger. I had a brief conversation with Kevin Hicks. I've talked to so yeah, that's my work.
Yeah, unfortunately, we generally can't put links in chats because the live stream has been, because of assholes putting naughty links in chats, you can no longer really put links in chats. So I don't think you can. We can put the name in the chat though. Yeah, that we can absolutely do 100%. So do you have, yeah, there it is. There it is. Okay. So you're not going to wear your coif, but what is that beautiful thing that you're going to put on your head?
2 hats to choose from right now. I have my traditional flat cap, which everyone really knows because it's iconic with its feather. But I think for now, I'm going with my Henry VIII flat cap, which is his most iconic hat.
Yes, it is. And what is it? So what is it made out of, and what is it edged in?
I'm not too sure the material of this one, but we know that Henry's would have been made of fine materials such as, I believe silk was something used, and although of course not mine, but Henry would have used different bird feathers. Around, I believe, I don't have my source now, but ostrich was used, I believe.
Yeah, ostrich was very popular in this era because ostriches don't come from anywhere near Europe. So it was a real luxury item to be able to afford imported ostrich feathers. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my finished outfit which, yeah, so this is my finished outfit.
Nice. Move a little bit to your, I guess did we determine that's your right? Yeah, there we go. Good. Perfect. Nice. Okay. Do a slow turn for us, Mason, if you please. Nice. Look at that. Isn't that a glorious, glorious ensemble? I wish men would still dress like this. Anything other than the way men dress in the West and in Asia, honestly. Y'all are dressing sloppy. Jeans and a t-shirt, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, everyone, we're only interested in positivity, honest questions. Constructive arguments are fine, but if you get rude, we will boot you forever. You will be shown the airlock. Don't be an asshole. Why be an asshole? Why are there so many people who want to be assholes these days? Don't be.
One thing you'll note is
Yeah.
a lot of people, when it comes to stuff like this, they will be. You meet them in person and they just won't say anything.
No. Most people are cowards. Most people are cowards, Mason. The garbage they will spew from the backside of a keyboard is not the garbage they would dare say to my face. Because if they said it to my face, they probably wouldn't survive the exchange. I'll be honest. I look pretty and demure. I am not demure.
I think my mug kind of completes the whole.
It does. Okay, so the comment is King Henry used cosmetics also. So actually, I don't know if Henry utilized cosmetics. Do you possibly he may have used some to cover up some of his sores. I don't know. Have you done any research into cosmetics for men in this era?
I have not seen any record of Henry using anything like that. Similar stuff that will be that he makes a lot of remedies for his leg. He makes one. This is nothing to do with cosmetics, but a medicine. It was a paste, I believe, and I believe mercury was involved in. He's rubbing it in his leg wound, all the ulcers and the open wound, and he makes it himself. And my source will be what was it called? It's a book. It was like all of his medicines. I don't want to say prescription books. I don't think that would be the right term, but it is written down, and it says a gray paste constructed by the King's Majesty at Hampton Court. So he's making stuff and he's wearing stuff, but it's not. I don't know anything about cosmetics.
Yeah, I actually haven't done much research into cosmetics that men may have used in the 15th or 16th century. It would not surprise me, however, if they did use it. Honestly, especially when you have blemishes, or in the case of Henry, when he was getting ulcers in places that were not just his legs later on. So it could be that he was using unfortunately, a lead-based cover-up foundation to do so, but I haven't seen direct evidence of it myself. Yeah. Comment, let me see. Would it be hard to dress like that as a woman in King Henry's Tudor court? Okay, so women in this era, I'm just going to change the screen. Women in this era would have just as many, if not more, layers. And women's clothing in this era would involve a lot of pins, not nearly as much lacing and pointing, and a lot of pins to secure the layers in place. So it would be an hour process at least to get dressed as an equivalent lady to what we see here with Mason's Henrican outfit, right? It would be, yeah, it would definitely be not as easy as all that. So now, which is not the same as working class. Please keep in mind that there are distinctions in the degree of ornamentation, and even in some cases, the number of layers you're going to wear. Whether you are a servant, whether you're a merchant's wife, whether you're a well-heeled merchant's wife, whether you're a member of the court, whether you're a lady, whether you're a baroness, whether you're a countess, whether you're a duchess, whether you're the princess, whether you're the queen. Right. But in general, 1520s to 1540s, it's a pretty involved process. And would it be easy to get dressed that way? No, which is why you would need to have help. Even if it's not a damsel, even if it's just your sister, your mother, your aunt, a friend, your maid, whatever. Easy it is not, at least in the upper echelons of society. Yeah. I'm sorry, Mason. I was... The lag probably left you to say something. Go ahead.
If anyone's interested in some of the clothing, I recommend Historic Royal Palaces' video of getting Crest and Liverpool Museum has one about
Yep.
Catherine Parr and dressing her.
Yep. Yep.
And they also have a series of dressing the maids and ladies in waiting.
Yep.
And it's really interesting. Catherine Parr actually allows her ladies in waiting to wear bonnets, and they have her crest actually embroidered into the cap, the bonnets.
Right. Yep. And keep in mind, everyone, the word bonnet is not what you're imagining. It's not something that looks like this necessarily. A bonnet is basically the hood combination that you see noble women, elegant, fashionable women wearing in this era. The word bonnet was just kind of a catch-all term for a headdress hat that you wore on your head. It didn't denote any specific kind or any specific style. So yeah, keep that in mind. When we say bonnet, we're not talking about like the Regency era style bonnets that we're about to talk about, actually. This is a different meaning for that word, which is why when you're studying fashion history, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot assume that a garment that is called a corset in the 14th century is the same as what a corset is at the end of the 19th century. Language evolves. Anyway, so does anyone have any final questions about Henrician clothing before we go on to our main topic of today, which is the garbage dumpster fire that is costuming in Bridgerton? Let me see, a couple of comments. What was Tudor loungewear like? I imagine there would have been less pins in that. No. So here's the thing. Loungewear, the idea of lounging is a recent development in human history. Now, granted, in the Roman Empire, there were a class of women who had time to just lounge, but most women didn't have time to just lounge. Most women, even women who ran households in the Roman Empire, still had to engage in certain kinds of activities, such as spinning. So lounging as a concept, as an activity, is a recent development. So what ladies would wear when they weren't in an official court scenario is basically the same layers, just less ornate with shorter trains. But it was still basically the same layers. The reality is that if you pin yourself together, you're not going to get stabbed by the pins. I promise you. I wear this ensemble. If I wore everything that should actually go on top of it, has multiple pins in multiple places, and I never get stabbed. And I can still relax by sitting on a turkey rug, as they were called in 16th century English, or by reposing upon a bench or something like that, right? Yeah, it's just the idea of lounging is really a new one. In the 15th and 16th century, even the aristocracy and well-heeled merchants still had very busy lives. They weren't just sitting around twiddling their thumbs looking for ways to occupy themselves. Unlike Regency England, by which point, by the era of Bridgerton, there is a privileged class of do-nothings. There really is, where they don't do very much and they actually do get bored and they have time for boredom. But that's not the world of the 15th and the 16th century. It just isn't. We're not there yet. We haven't reached that level of ease in society. Yeah. Okay, let's see. Let me see. I can never understand why down south they have their ren fairs in the summer. All the women die of heat but look amazing. Yeah, so Mason, this brings us back to the topic of natural fibers, doesn't it? Yeah, I don't understand why they have ren fairs in the south in the summer either, just because no one should want to be outside during the day in that weather. But the reality is that if people were actually wearing the proper natural fibers in the appropriate layers, they wouldn't die of heat. But most people can't afford natural fibers. They can't afford silk. They can't afford wool. They can't afford linen. So they end up cutting corners. Cotton is far inferior to linen in hot weather. Far inferior, as Mason's fanning himself. Cotton. Oh, wait, hold a minute. Let me see if I can do this. Cotton is far inferior, just so inferior to, or linen is inferior to cotton for summer weather, right? Just 100%. So, you know, that's part of the problem with these Ren Fair costumes is they're wearing a lot of synthetics and they're not wearing the right kind of fabrics for that weather. Yeah. Yeah, that's a great comment. Oh goodness, we have fallen so behind. Going to sleep as I am a flaneur. Tomikor, sleep well, my dear. Flaneur unite. Have you told them about Queen Elizabeth's perfume baubles yet? It's a great fashion history story of Robespierre. If you're talking about pomanders, that actually predates Elizabeth. So pomanders, we have pomanders from the 15th century. Pomander, do you have a pomander, Mason, on hand? I don't have one on hand.
I don't have a pomander at the moment.
Yeah. Pomanders are basically a metal cage ball, is the best way I can describe it, into which one should place sweet-smelling herbs, spices, or resins, right? So that you will have basically a bauble upon your person that will actually smell nice. And this was not just a question of we want to smell nice. And it wasn't because people didn't wash their bodies. It wasn't because people smell bad. Do you know why people wore pomanders, Mason? What was the real reason?
I feel like you're going to say, like, wait a minute, yeah.
So it actually, go on.
It does work as like a gentle perfuming as you walk, but
do you know why that was important? Why people desperately wanted that?
I imagine because certain smells can kind of show, kind of similar to how more fabric, more money, or like, to smell certain smells, I'd imagine.
Oh, you're looking at it as a form of conspicuous consumption. Well, the kind of scent that you would choose would absolutely be a form of conspicuous consumption. But the reason everyone wanted to smell nice is the theory of miasma. Are you familiar with the theory of miasma?
That disease is carried by bad smells.
Yes.
And
yes.
So they say, like, oh, you could sit, they believe that bad air brings disease and lots of bad things. Because, of course, germ theory is not a thing.
Right. Exactly. So the theory of miasma, and that's where the word malaria comes from. Malaria literally means malaria, literally means bad air. So the thought is that if you smell nice, you will fend off the contagion, right? The contagion can't come for you. The miasma will go away. It will leave you alone as long as you smell nice, which is why everyone in medieval and early modern Europe wanted to smell nice, why they wanted to stay clean, because they thought if they didn't, they would catch the plague. Right. So that's why people were wearing pomanders. And it wasn't just Elizabeth I. Everyone found a way to scent their bodies in a pleasant way and make sure that they would not be subject to contagion. Yep. Okay. Let me see. Yeah. Armor and castings. Yeah. Rosemary says, miasma. Smells carry disease. You are correct, Mary. Takeda says, I need to get a nice brass or ceramic censer to hang in my tent to sweeten the air. I support this message, Takeda. Nevis says miasma theory, correct. Back in the day, there were no synthetic materials. Synthetics were discovered in the mid-19th century. Synthetics weren't discovered, they were invented. But yeah. Mason, do you know anything about the first synthetic fabrics? Actually, it's not entirely true. We actually have evidence of synthetic fabric from like 2,000 years ago, but it didn't catch on. Do you know anything about the 19th century synthetics that were developed during the Industrial Revolution?
I do not.
Oh, wow. So the first of them really is celluloid. Have you ever heard of celluloid?
Yes, celluloid. Yes, I have.
Yeah. Do you know? So celluloid is basically, it's the first plastic. Yeah. Mason, do you know what is wrong? What the big downside of celluloid is, aside from, having a horrible environmental footprint?
I don't know.
Celluloid is massively flammable, and it burns real hot. And so they were actually making dresses, the 1860s style dresses, out of celluloid. Think about, and I mean, like, it was fashionable. So like fashionable ladies were wearing those massive gowns with all those layers and all the frills and all the tucks and the pleats. out of celluloid. Can you imagine what would happen if a highly flammable material like that came into contact with the single spark from, oh, I don't know, the oil lamps and gas lanterns and candle flames that were everywhere to be found in the 1860s and 1870s? Are you imagining it? What do you think happened?
I imagine it would probably catch flame.
Yes. Have you ever heard of spontaneous combustion?
Yeah.
Right. So there's a theory now that spontaneous combustion wasn't so spontaneous as it was made out to be, but because it took such a minute spark to set celluloid afire, that it just looked like it was spontaneous, but it wasn't. This was a world lit only by fire still. And they were wearing the most flammable material perhaps invented to that point. That was actually a fabric, right? So yeah, synthetics, real bad. And to this day, synthetics are still flammable, guys. And they burn really hot and they melt into your skin and they will give you the worst kind of second and third degree burns you can imagine. And they will just keep burning. Even when the fire is out, they are so hot that they will just keep burning into you. So please don't wear synthetics if you're going to do any kind of events that involve open flame. Just don't do it.
We have something in chat I think we both may want to pick apart.
Okay. What is it?
To quote his Tash, wrong place to say that. Igor says, wrong. In Europe, they were wearing perfumes because they washed once or twice a year.
Oh my!
Of Russia, who teaches Europe is your wash. Which one?
Oh my! Rachel? No, go on, Mason. Go on, Mason. Go, my friend.
So, I can tell you about Tudor England. Yeah, so it's kind of a mini ice age is the term we use. It's cold, and people are washing. I don't even know how to try this. You want to smell good. You want to be fresh. You want to smell good. Henry VIII smells because he has a rotting leg. It is rotting. He is alive and rotting.
Yep.
You can smell it because it's infected. It is leaking. No, that's why he smells. And
yes.
Bathing, it's not as much as we do it, but it's still very common. And they wash their hands for meals. Henry washes his hands. He uses, I believe, rose water was used commonly.
Yes.
Uses it. He washes his hands in it before he eats, after he eats. They're clean. They're clean. Maybe not as much as it will be today, but certainly clean.
Well, anyone who thinks that modern people are more clean than medieval Europeans, they need to travel the world and see how everyone lives outside of their little hometown. So just because you live in a town in the middle of the United States, for instance, where people shower 2 to 3 times a day, that doesn't mean that's how the majority of people in this world live, right? Medieval people, here's the other myth. You didn't need to bathe in a bathtub to be clean, right? A basin of water and a washcloth are all you need. And we know that people up until the 16th century had access to public bathhouses everywhere in Europe, and that on average they bathed once a week at the bathhouse. They went to the bathhouse, took an actual bath, went through all the different stages. It was kind of like a medieval spa day. We know that in medieval Paris, in the Latin Quarter, one of the things that students complained about is that at the crack of dawn, a man would go through the streets calling out that the water was hot. If you wanted a hot bath, now was the time to do it, right? It's just not true that people in medieval Europe smelled bad. Now, in the 16th century, there is a change. Bathhouses are closed down across Europe. Mason, do you know why those bathhouses are closed down in many places?
I can tell about England. I can say England.
Yeah, go ahead.
When the monasteries are dissolved, a lot of monasteries also had these bathhouses, and they end up getting demolished alongside the actual monasteries.
Right. Yeah. Well, so the bathhouses are also closed down in England in response to the plague. And that's because what most people don't realize is that, yes, the Black Death hits Europe the hardest in the mid-14th century, but it keeps coming back every 10 to 20 years.
It does.
And which is why the population continues to not really grow, and what allows laborers to demand more wages, higher wages. But one of the responses to that, eventually syphilis comes along, and makes a big, old, ugly appearance by the end of the 15th and the early 16th century. And so basically across Europe, everyone gets the idea that, well, we should probably shut the bathhouses down, because it's clearly the bathhouses that are causing the spread of this disease. It's something about bathing that opens your body up and exposes it to contagion. So we need to close the bathhouses down. Of course, the reason that syphilis, if it were happening, the reason syphilis would have spread at the bathhouses, Mason, do you know why syphilis was possibly spreading via the bathhouses? Have you heard about what some of the bathhouses functioned as?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I know what you're talking about now.
Yeah. What was their secondary role in some cases?
Do I have to say it?
I mean, you don't. I can say they were brothels, right? They were brothels. So bathhouses, not all of them though. Some bathhouses had a secondary role as a brothel, which meant that people were, having sex and spreading sexually transmitted infections. So by the early 16th century, all across Europe, everyone kind of comes to the same conclusion. We need to close down the bathhouses to stop the spread of disease. And Erasmus, actually writing in the 1520s in Flanders, writes that in 1500, he says 20 years ago, there were bathhouses everywhere to be found, but now there are almost none left. And it's not even so much that they were shut down by the authorities, although in some cases they were, but in many cases, it's just that people stopped going, so the bathhouses went out of business. But again, Mason, do you really absolutely have to submerge your whole body in water in order to get it clean?
I mean,
do you?
1 second. Sorry, I caught up reading some of the chats.
Oh.
Because we missed a few.
Oh, did we? Okay, well, let me answer that question. So the reality is, everyone, despite what you may think, you don't have to shower and you don't have to submerge your body in a tub of water for it to be clean. All you need is a bowl and a rag. And the health manuals all the way into the end of the 16th century all talk about the necessity of washing yourself first thing in the morning, brushing your teeth, washing your hands before, during, and after meals, washing yourself before you go to bed. So no, I'm sorry. There is no evidence that people were filthy, dirty, and stank in the Middle Ages and early modern era. But they do start stinking by the 17th century. There is lots of evidence of that, but that's not the Middle Ages, guys. History does not progress in a linear fashion. Human progress does not progress in a linear fashion. Yep. Yeah, spit bath for the win, Rosemary. Well, hopefully you have some water at least. Okay, Mason, comments we missed. What did we miss?
Okay, there were a few involving the whole watching thing, but Igor is banned, I believe, Ryan said, so we don't need to talk about more. But yeah. What did we miss? Vicky T says, wasn't Henry a germaphobe before it was a thing? He was. Any mention of sickness, and he went, he was like, okay, no, he would. I use the word quarantine, but he was like, any mention of sickness, any rumor of any form of illness, and understandably too. I mean, his brother dies at 15. He has a sweating sickness. His mother gets an infection. She has childbed fever. Like a lot of his family and people in general, family too, die a lot of different diseases and infections. So I do understand, like, his whole life, he grows up and everybody that, a lot of people he loves are just dropping dead. They get sick. And so understand.
I mean, Arthur dies. His brother Arthur dies.
Yeah.
He just gets sick and dies. And it's unbelievable, right? This young man who before that was so athletic and so energetic and promised to be the next King Arthur, right? The once and future King of England. and he dies. That terrified. I know that terrified Henry. That had to have just instilled in him a sheer terror of any kind of sickness.
I don't know if there's any other cats that we missed.
Yeah, for those who are wondering what I'm doing something called lace making or finger loop braiding, and it is a repetitive weaving process. That's why I am moving the way I am. I am crafting as we move along. Okay. Yeah, that's the movements. The movements are me doing something called finger loop braiding. On my YouTube channel, I have a full-length tutorial on how to do this if you would like to make your own medieval laces using finger loop braiding, right? Yep, that's what I'm doing. Oh, well, thank you for that compliment, Smoke Indica. Appreciate that. Okay, so technically, did Arthur get the fever that his father brought over with his mercenaries? We actually, I don't think anyone has reliably identified the disease, the disease that killed Arthur. So I can't answer that. I haven't seen any, the disease that killed Prince Arthur, Crown Prince Arthur.
The leading theory is sweating sickness or tuberculosis. I lean to the sickness, and Catherine was sick too.
Yeah. So it's just, but they haven't. There's no we don't have a way to know, because as far as I know, they haven't analyzed his bones to see what virus or bacteria might be lurking within. So yeah, the theories I've read are tuberculosis or sweating sickness.
Yeah.
So, the way, based on the symptoms, basically, and the way he deteriorated, over a period of time, not like one night to the next he was dead. He got sickly, he grew sickly, then he grew sick, then he died. Yeah. Am I Amish? No, I am not Amish. How can, God, okay, here's some very easy ways you can tell I'm not Amish. One, I've got a massive décolleté. You can see all of this skin. That is not modest. That is not Amish. Two, the so-called Amish bonnet does not look anything like this. Three, I'm wearing a bright blue dress, and that is not a modest color in the Amish community. So no, I'm not Amish.
I'd also say probably because you're doing a live stream on technology, which is probably not something you'd be doing.
Yeah, so apparently I've since been informed. I once commented that. One, two, you can see me on live stream. Apparently members of the Amish community have now have smartphones, and they now are YouTubing and TikToking and Instagramming their lives. So I guess they've gotten over that whole modern technology is the devil's work thing. Yeah. If you were Amish, would you be doing a live stream? Apparently some are. There was a comment. Oh, question. Do I think that Catherine of Aragon actually consummated her marriage with Arthur? Yes, I do. 100% I think they did. I think she said they didn't because she knew if she admitted they had, she wouldn't have been able to marry Henry. And she was in a real desperate situation. She was in a very desperate situation. Marrying Henry was the only way she was going to actually not die in penury, basically, at that point. Yeah, go on. Yes.
I personally don't think she did because, the whole thing, she's very pious. But even if she did, the papal dispensation that they got to get married, Henry and Catherine, it says that even if it was consummated, it's fine. The marriage is fine. So no matter what, that's what I don't think she did, because during the hearing, to be like, are you guys gonna get an annulment? Well, she says she didn't, but but no matter what, she could say she did, because the papal dispensation says outright, even if she did, oh well, your husband and wife. You're not brother and sister. You're husband and wife.
Well, so here's the evidence that I think she did. One, there's a chronicler who quotes Arthur as coming out of the bedchamber the next morning and saying that he was so parched because he spent the night in hot Spain. That's pretty clear. But also, after he died, she insisted on waiting before proceeding with a new marriage to see if she was pregnant. So I don't think she would have done that. I don't think she would have done that if they hadn't consummated the marriage, honestly. So I think they did. They were really in love. They had a fairy tale romance, really. Catherine and Arthur did. Because they actually had this correspondence before they even got married. They exchanged all of these letters, and really talked about deep intellectual things. And the idea that she was Catholic and pious, which means she wouldn't have been sexually active, is just not true. She was a medieval Catholic, and medieval Catholics were super into sex. And they believed that sexual intercourse was their duty to procreate. I'm pretty certain that they consummated that marriage. All the evidence I've seen points towards it. And they were they were teenagers. What teenager is going to resist those hormones? None. Now, you could say that Arthur was inept and maybe he didn't know what he was doing, and that's entirely possible.
I would like to say when I mentioned being Catholic, I meant more about the lying than the whole.
Oh, I see. Oh, whether she lied or not. I see what you're saying. Right.
The whole, the way, because that's why she's Catholic, and the lying thing is what I see. But then again,
right. Yes, agreed.
I wouldn't know. But at the end of the day, the papal dispensation is kind of like, oh well, whatever, right? Brush that off, guys. Brush that off.
Yeah, I mean, by the time Henry is using that against her, he's decided he's the head of the church anyway. So basically, there is nothing she could have done or said that would have saved her. Basically, Let me see. Yeah, I've always felt sorry for Catherine. Yeah, Catherine. If we did the number of people I blocked, we would all be bombed. Yeah, I actually am not certain about the oath she gave or how she phrased it. There's a history of women especially being very clever about how they phrase an oath, right? So that the oath they are swearing is literally the truth, if not in spirit the truth. Like there's a long history of women and men in medieval history doing things like that. So, yeah. Is who from England? Luis Garcia, are you talking to us or are you talking in the chat? I think he's kind of hard to tell sometimes. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, we were actually here today to talk about the clothing in Bridgerton. And I have to say, my number one pet peeve in the clothing is the cut and how they so Bridgerton takes place in the Regency era, and some people will argue that it is a Regency. It's actually fantasy. It's not supposed to be history, and certainly it has some obviously fantasy aspects about it. But it's still claiming to be in a place called England, with a queen called Charlotte and a king called George III. So it is clearly still a historical England, a historical place, even if it's a imaginatively depicted one, right? Even if, I would agree that you could call it alternate history. It's an alternate history series, but fantasy it is not. I would not call it fantasy. It's an alternate history series. Even still, the thing that annoys me the most about the costuming is that it's so modern. It's all one layer. It's cut in a very tailored, in a very modern way. The silhouettes are very modern. The overlays, the colors are modern. The ornamentation is modern. If you want to see accurate clothing, sometimes you can look at some of the servants, but even the maids are all wearing modernized empire waisted dresses with all these darts and all these tucks and modern and box pleating that just wasn't done in the Regency era. It just makes me crazy. And even the basic silhouette is wrong, right? So Mason, in your research, did you see what was the basic silhouette for women? What was the ideal placement of the breasts, for instance? We have lost sound for you, my dear. You are now completely silent, sadly, because I think you were going to say some interesting things.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're back.
Is my microphone turned off?
That's fun. Technology, so wonderful.
Night when you're live stream of cutting out.
Oh yeah, corsets on skin. Corsets on skin. No chemise made me cringe. Yeah, that makes me crazy too. Corsets on bare skin. Mason, why is it? Why is it that until the 20th century, everyone in Europe and every European living in the United States and Canada wore a linen garment or cotton garment against their skin? Why? Why do we do that?
Ow, sorry. Ow. Stuck. Let me just. I would argue probably a few different reasons one could argue.
Yes, go on.
For most of course, the whole fact keeps you clean, but I don't know if that by now we would still have that kind of idea of the idea that it changes. Plus, throughout history, when you have large garments, one layer that absorb. This is always done. It's absorbed any oil. It's absorbed like. Yeah.
Unfortunately, you are cutting in and out. So while you figure out your sound situation, I'll go ahead and answer the question in all the words. So the reason that you don't wear a corset against your skin is because you would sweat into your corset. It would smell bad. It would stain. Corsets are not as easy to launder as the linen or cotton shift, as it would have been called in early Regency England, would have been. So all of these women with these corsets, with these support garments right against their skin, yeah, that makes me absolutely insane, absolutely crazy. And also tight lacing. How many of those damn corsets do they show sucking the women's waists in? No, just no. Not a Regency thing. Regency stays, as they were called, by the way. Regency stays were not designed to tight lace the waist. If any, the only thing they were designed to do was to smooth out the torso and make sure that, it had a nice kind of smooth shape, but they weren't really boned below the bust area. So there is no tight lacing. That scene where what's her name in season 1 is being laced so tightly into her gown that she passes out, didn't happen in Regency England. It just wasn't a thing. You would absolutely wear linen undergarments under that. Okay, Mason, are you trying to test your sound again?
Okay, can you hear me?
We can.
Good. Okay, good.
I don't know what was happening. That was weird.
No, I think it's something on my end. During my notes, I actually wrote down every layer. I was watching something. I was doing my research. Every layer that you would wear for a dress of this time. And it bothers me how they always portray a corset as this garment that's making them practically choking you. But if you're doing it up properly, especially at this point in time, if you're doing it up properly, you're not going to be on the verge of death, as they like to portray it. And if you are, you should likely fire the person who is helping you put it on.
Yeah. I mean, so I've actually, have you been to England? Have you been to Bath, to the costume museum there?
I have not.
Okay. So I've been to many museums all over the world which have extant Regency garments in them. The stays, there are two kinds of stays in this era, in the Bridgerton time period, right? There's two kinds of stays. There's one kind of stay that is long format. I'm going to have to switch so you can actually see. Okay, there's one kind of stay that goes down to the hips, but the supportive part of that garment is only from the bust up. The rest is just fabric, basically, to smooth the line so that it's almost more like a girdle, but it's not tight. It's fitted. It fits the exact shape of your body, more or less, smoothing it out only a little bit. But it's not going to restrict you. And they're actually soft. If you look at them, it's soft support. The hard support is only up to here, right? And then the short stays that actually are popular in the Regency costume community as well are actually not based on extant short stays either. They're actually too short and too much like a a sports bra. The actual short stays that have survived have actually the scalloping on the bottom, and they go to about here. And they have the same scalloping that you see on the 18th century stays. And they are boned actually, but not super rigidly. They're designed to actually, support the body, but they're not designed to tight lace. If anything, they're designed to be tight right under the breasts so that there is support. Because when in your research, did you look to see what the desirable décolleté is, the desirable shape position of breasts in Regency is, contrary to what everyone mistakenly thinks?
No, I went over more generic, broad fashion.
Right. So this makes me crazy because it's something you see immediately in Bridgerton. They want massive cleavage where the breasts are cleaving together and forming a shelf. But actually, the Regency stays are designed to separate the breasts and lift them up like two apples. So you don't end up with uniboob. Uniboob is not a thing. If you actually look at the stays from this period, they're two cups and they're separate. They're not like here. There's actually a space between them because that was the desirable look. So it completely changes the way these gowns look the second you have a support garment that does that instead of creating uniboob. So that makes me crazy because anytime they depict tight lacing, they depict stays that restrict the waist. That's not Regency. That's just not the Regency era. It just isn't. Yeah, that absolutely makes me crazy. Boots. Let me see. Any comments here? Yeah. Okay. So, what sorts of things when you were examining the clothing in Bridgerton, what sorts of things made you a little crazy?
A better question, what didn't?
Okay, yeah, that's actually shorter. That'll be a shorter live stream.
That really bothered me. Just the lack of a proper bonnet.
Oh God, yes. God, the bonnets, the no bonnets. No one is wearing bonnets. I think I saw like 3 bonnets in the whole series, right? And none of the main characters are depicted as wearing bonnets. It's so annoying. All of the hair in general makes me angry because it's very modern, and the makeup too. Oh, the makeup, the glamour girl makeup, heavy eyeshadow, heavy mascara, cat eyes, lipstick that's so garish and just over the top, faces that have clearly been contoured to have that, Cosmo look to them. That is not a Regency aesthetic. That's not a pre-20th century aesthetic at all. And they got really heavy. The first season it was okay, but suddenly in the second season you can't see their eyes anymore. It's like it's just all cosmetics. Like their eyeballs are in there somewhere, but God knows where they are. You can't see them past the eyeshadow and mascara. Do you know anything about the proper cosmetic aesthetic? What kinds of cosmetics would have been used in this era then, and the kind of look it should have created or would have created?
Not the Regency, no. Before the Regency, a little bit before the Regency, not the Regency period itself. No.
Right, so it's not much different, honestly. So in the Regency period, women would have been wearing white lead foundation to smooth out their complexions. They would have had some light rouging, probably made from insects like cochineal or kermes, right?
With a little passion for like covering such things like blemishes or moles. Were those still in fashion by this point, or have they fallen out?
I'm not certain if the beauty mark was still a thing in the Regency era. I don't know. I didn't look into that. But I was thinking, the more general look should be delicate. It should be modest. It should, lightly rouged cheeks, very lightly, just to give some color, some nice little apples on your face to cut over top of the white lead-based foundation. Eyeshadow, eyeliner, mascara, Not a thing in Regency England. So it just, all these women walking around with, as Hamlet says in Shakespeare's, well, Hamlet, the eponymous Hamlet, as he says, God gives you one face and you paint yourselves another. That is a real truth about Bridgerton. It's just, it's so distracting. It's an offense to those women, those actresses. They're beautiful. They don't need to have glamour girl makeup to be beautiful, right? It's just so awful. What about the
And
hair? Did you look at the hair?
I don't get me started on the hair.
I do. This is literally the point of this live stream. I'm now getting you started on the hair.
Did they? I know it's not supposed to be accurate, and I know people are always like, "Oh, well, it's just for entertainment." Well, oh my God, did they look at all? Did they just kind of have a discussion like, okay, I remember I was watching thing when I was waiting for you to join, and they're talking. This was different, but this was about the Masquerade in season 4, and they're
Right?
talking
Yeah.
research, and they mentioned what they're doing. I'm like, what research? What research possibly do? 'Cause I'm not seeing any here.
No, no. And I'll tell you, the masquerade costumes, they all look like the masquerade costumes that I see from the end of the 19th century and the early 20th century. They look like those fancy dress costumes. Those are not fancy dress costumes of the Regency era. They're just not. They are absolutely not. Not.
I don't know the characters' names, but they showed off the Cleopatra. I don't know who the other one was supposed to be, but those ones specifically. I'm talking about how they were inspired like the '60s with the movie Cleopatra. You're making a show that takes place in the Regency. You're looking at a movie from the '60s about a woman who lived a couple thousand years ago. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Is there
Yeah. No. Yeah, the Egypt craze postdates the Regency era because it's the Napoleonic Wars in Egypt, the French campaigns, the English campaigns in Egypt, which are still happening, by the way, in at the time of this movie, that opens up the world to the idea of Egypt. But Egypt, there is no Egypt mania. That doesn't become part of the aesthetic. That doesn't enter the consciousness as an actual authentic reflection of Egyptian culture until the end of the 19th century. That is not a Regency era thing. Not at all. Oh, and what about the Joan of Arc costume? Did you see that? Did you see it?
I have my computer. Should I look that up?
The Joan of Arc costume. God, what's her name? Yeah, Eloise's Joan of Arc costume with her bangs. That is, someone said, oh yes, we copied that off of this poster from the early 20th century. That's an early 20th century depiction of Joan of Arc. She would not have been recognized as such in the Regency era with a pageboy cut and bangs like that. Joan of Arc did not have a pageboy cut. She probably had a bowl cut. If she didn't have her own hair, if she cut her hair into anything, it was a bowl cut. And that whole outfit, the fake armor and the fake chainmail, the whole thing, the silhouette is entirely wrong for the Regency era, for fancy dress of the Regency era. And that hair.
I looked at the dress you're talking about. Who designed this? I want a word with them, please.
Yeah. Please look up the Joan of Arc costume. It's terrible. It's so early 20th century. I just, and the hair, the glamour girl hair, and the number of women, of adult women who are wearing their hair down makes me crazy. Like once you reach adolescence and are introduced to society, you no longer wear your hair down in Regency England. It should be worn up, but so many of these ladies are walking around with their hair, with the front of their hair swept up into some kind of chignon and the back of it just left down, in curls or whatever. God, that is not appropriate for the Regency, not even a little bit.
I'm also a bit mad. I watched videos about the costuming throughout the whole thing because I didn't have a lot of time. But what was it, Penelope, the character, the dresses in the first season? Oh my God. But no, they are not doing this right at all. The sleeves, that well, I don't know if you call them sleeves, but no, too small. And they are putting, how would I describe it? I forget the word. The, I guess you say skirt part, it's up too high. At the highest point of the bust is where they put it. It should not be there.
You're talking about the waistline that cuts across the middle of the breasts, basically. That
Yeah.
one.
And then
Yeah, that's pretty bad.
and then eventually, they changed that. I think because in the original books this is based off of, she just randomly loses like 30 pounds in like the beginning, and that's when the whole thing happens. But oh my God. So I guess that was how they're thinking they would do it, but no, no, no. Burn it
Yeah.
all.
Yeah, either the waists are too high or they're way too low. That's the other problem is that even though the so-called waist might be right below the bust, they then put all these darts into the skirts so that it shapes and follows the curvature of their waist. That is not a Regency silhouette. That is not a Regency style. That is not a Regency silhouette. That's a 20th century evening gown style from the 90s. I know because I had such a dress to attend the governor's ball when I was 16. I had a dress that looked almost exactly like the dresses they're wearing in Bridgerton. um, those that's you just don't have that shaping. And I read that it was because they wanted to make Lady Featherington look like a fashion forward lady, not conformist, not one of the usual lady of the ton. And so they dressed her in what was her name? That designer's name, Jessa McCall. Jessa McClintock. That's it, Jessa McClintock. She's dressed in dresses that look like they were designed by Jessa McClintock in the 90s. Right? It's terrible. Like I don't care if she's supposed to be fashion forward. There are ways. There are Regency ways to be fashion forward. Did you read anything about Les Merveilleuses in your explorations of Regency fashion? Les Merveilleuses, the marvelous ladies, were these mostly French ladies, who were Parisian, very, very risque. And they were not ladies of the night. They were just ladies who were dressing at the bleeding edge of fashion. But their way of dressing at the bleeding edge of fashion was to wear gowns of transparent muslin. Transparent muslin. And I do mean transparent. And that were cut in this beautiful empire neoclassical style to look like these Grecian statues. Muslin, however, is not very good at insulating against the cold. So apparently when the winter hit, Les Merveilleuses didn't really modify their fashions sufficiently, and so many of them contracted pneumonia and died. So it was literally a deadly fashion, but that's how you could be cutting edge, was by wearing layers that were transparent and that actually revealed some of your more intimate parts. So if they wanted Lady Featherington to be a fashion-forward lady who didn't follow the strictures of the ton, they could have dressed her in contemporary French fashions, and everyone would have known, yeah, she's definitely not doing what we're doing, because the English tried everything they could to not be French in this era. It's the Napoleonic War. And yet they still kind of ended up following French fashions, usually a couple of years behind because of the war. So, it's like, if you're going to have them be fashion forward, then do the fashion forward in a Regency way, not in a modern way. Same thing with the hair. Those gross hairstyles. Susan says, in my opinion, it showed Lady Featherington's poor taste. Oh, Mason, have you lost sound again?
No.
Oof. What is going on with your microphone today? Question, why is she doing that? I assume you're talking by she, you mean I, Derry. I am doing something, a 15th century craft, textile art called finger loop braiding. And there are basically loops around my fingers, and you manipulate the loops in various patterns to create trim and ribbon and cord. So that's why I'm doing this. Yep. Be kind to the English, we dominated the world.
Can you
I
hear
mean,
me?
yes, we can hear you now. I am also part English, being a true American mutt. My ancestors came over from England on the Mayflower. They were Protestant nutters. Sorry, not Protestant nutters, Puritan nutters who came over on the Mayflower. So, yeah, I can trace my ancestry back to the 11th century in England. Um, but you know, the English the English had their own fashions basically. All were kind of empire wasted, but there were some differences. The French in this era are actually cutting their dresses to not go all the way to the ground, to actually expose their ankles, which puts a lie to the idea that, oh, it was so scandalous to show your ankles. It was not. That's a modern myth. Sorry, everyone. We can't see your hands from the peekaboo window. Okay, let me see if I can move a little bit this way. There we go. Okay, stand like this. Yes, okay, there we go. Yep. If you're interested in learning how to do finger loop braiding, I actually have a full-length tutorial, 20 minutes, explains everything you need to know on how to make a very simple yet beautiful lace of 3 different colors. It's really pretty. It's called a green dorge. Check that out on my YouTube channel. Yeah.
Lost.
Okay, are you back? Is your sound back? Say a whole sentence.
I can't. I don't. Okay, my sound is back now. A second ago, it wasn't. I think I have to yell for my phone to actually pick up my talking.
Oh, did you have a microphone that lost charge or?
Oh, I'm still trying to find. I have to actually for when I'm doing my videos. It hurts to yell a lot, but I have
Yeah, totally understand. Yeah, we'll have to. Do you have a headset? You could also just put on the headset microphone. Would probably you connect it via Bluetooth. You could connect it, and then we can pick up your sound.
I used to have one. I used to have a good pair, and I lost them. I haven't seen them since my Claire Ridgway interview back in July. And then one day, I never saw them again.
Oh, right. You have gremlins too. I also have gremlins, or brownies, or sprites, or whatever you want to call them that make off with the valued items of my household. Yeah. That is a thing. That is a problem. That is a constant problem. Yeah, I totally get that. I think it's the same creatures that steal our socks, but only one of the socks, not both of the socks.
Probably also. Oh my god. On topic of socks, I keep getting holes in my socks in the worst places, the ones I wear for my costumes, because they're the places that you can't actually fix it.
Oh,
Without.
there's no place you can't actually fix it. Where are you getting holes in your stockings?
It's not always the same. I usually have them fixed, but sometimes I actually have to double them up sometimes because I can't. Right? I'll fix it. I'll fix it, but then it all just falls apart, and I don't know. Maybe I need to get new ones anyway. Right? These ones are just far past their years.
Right. Yeah, I basically, one of the most common things I do with my medieval living history kit is repairs, and stockings are nearly always in need of repair. I just resole the whole sole at this point. I don't even bother with individual patches anymore. It's the thieving hobbit seas. Yep. Stealing the precious. Yeah. So yeah, Bridgerton. What else is really annoying? Oh God, this season, season 4, there are back vents on the garments, on their spencers and their coats and their pelisses. They put back vents on them. Do you know what I mean by a back vent?
I think.
Yeah, it's like, for those of you who don't know what a back vent is, you probably have garments that have it. It's where there's like a giant pleat in the back of your garment, and then when you pull your arms forward, the vent opens up because it gives you a little more mobility. But the reason back vents were invented is because we started using a terrible, stupid style of armscye that gives you no mobility, right? So notice I have no back vent, and yet I have full range of motion on a fitted garment, right? Regency garments had the kind of sleeve cap that allowed women to put their arms forward and put their arms back and lift their arms up. They didn't need a back vent, but they're getting so lazy about the tailoring on these garments that I think they had to put back vents in them so that the actors could actually move their arms. instead of just using an authentic early 19th century cut for the garments. It's like you're using modern adaptations so that you can continue to use modern tailoring instead of just figuring out how to make your sleeve cap not as tall and pointy. It's so irritating. It looks all of the things in Bridgerton this season would look perfectly fine at a Burberry's or at a Chanel store or at a Gucci store. And the second that is the case, you know you've gone wrong with your historical costuming. Question. Let me see. Oh, poo. Are robes à la française before or after when Bridgerton is supposed to be set? They are before. That's a great question. Thank you for that. The robe à la française, which literally means dress in the French style, for those who are wondering, that is more more like last third of the 18th century. Right. So yeah, that predates that. At least I think the one you're thinking of as the robe à la française predates Bridgerton by a significant degree. Yeah. And the thing is that in England during the period of Bridgerton, when the Napoleonic Wars are still fully going on, which is like 1800-ish to 1815, the fashions in England are not adapting as quickly as the fashions in France. They're not following the fashions in France as tightly as they were before the Napoleonic War, because there is actually and this is hard for us to imagine in the modern world, but there is actually a cutoff of communications from France to England. So they're not getting the fashion magazines with the fashion plates with the latest and greatest fashions from Paris anymore. Which, again, in our modern world of instant, constant, ubiquitous, omnipresent, omniscient communication is hard for us to believe, but that was the truth. So whereas fashions were evolving, at quite a clip actually in France, they actually didn't evolve quite as quickly in England, and they didn't evolve in the same direction, which I found very interesting. Yeah. Another interesting point, in the Regency era, the garment that provides support is referred to as stays, not as a corset. Corset is actually a later term to refer to what were stays. That's a later introduction into the English language. And in the Regency era, a garment that is called a corset isn't necessarily an undergarment. And in fact was a very stylish overgarment, which some of the things that people are thinking are short stays are not. They're actually like a little structured fitted vest-like thing that actually goes over top of your gowns. Sorry, Mason, you were going to say something?
My audio is gone again.
I am sorry, my dear. I don't know why it's being so difficult this time. Okay, so your goal for our next live stream is to get either a good microphone or a good headset. That is your goal. Your phone clearly can't be relied upon. Sadly. Let me see. I think my audio is out again. Are you a Quaker? I'm not. Amish are not Quakers. I'd also like to point that out. Modern Quakers dress like everyone else. I grew up in Delaware, so I grew up very near to Quaker country. Quakers don't dress like this anymore, guys, nor do the Shakers are extinct. Quakers are a religion. They don't dress in any particular way. And no, I'm not Amish. Isn't following fashion an admittance that you're superficial? That's an interesting question. The thing is that humans, actually, I appreciate that comment. Does following fashion admit that you're superficial? Actually, I think humans have evolved to want to constantly have new things, to want to have a new look, to want to have a new garment, to want something that is different from whatever it is we had just before. And I think that's just part of our evolutionary journey. So in following a fashion, in the sense of honestly looking at something and saying, ooh, that's really awesome, I want that too, I don't think that's superficial. I think that's part of our programming. Following the fashion in the sense of, oh, well, everyone else is wearing it, I have to wear it, that might not be superficial either. Because if you think about it, conformity is one of the things that allows us to be part of the group and to not be targeted. as being an outlier, right? Until very recently, in the United States and Europe, it was not a good thing if you looked noticeably different from other people. Ask me how I know, because I was a teenager in the 90s and I used to wear my medieval clothes to school, despite the ridicule that I received, or in spite of the ridicule I received, right? Because I didn't want to do what the herd was doing, but I understood that was going to place me at risk of not just ostracization, but possibly violence. So I don't think it's superficial to follow the general fashion trends, because I think we've evolved for that also. Yeah. It seems superficial, but I actually don't think it is. And humans are creative, right? Creativity is part of our DNA. Different people express, it's how we've evolved. Being creative has allowed us to progress and evolve past many of our fellow animals.
Oh, did my audio just pick up?
I can hear you. We can hear you now.
I think I just have to be very close to my...
Probably. Yeah. Unless you have a really expensive camera with a really good microphone, you generally have to be pretty close.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I really think that humans have evolved to be creative. It's what's allowed us to get to the point we are.
Yeah.
And different people express that creativity in different ways. And that's what has also allowed us to evolve as a species, right? Different kinds of creativity converging to lead to progress and technological development. So some people express their creativity in what they put on their bodies. Some people express it in how they do their hair or their makeup or piercing. Some people express their creativity by coding. Some people do it by designing buildings, right? So I don't actually think it's superficial in any way, in fact, to follow a fashion or to lead, to be a fashion leader. I think we've evolved for it on multiple levels, and it's one of the things that has allowed us to thrive as a species. That turned into more of an essay than I was anticipating it would, but thank you for that great question. I really appreciate it. Let me see. And yeah, Slasheration says not everyone who claims they are Christian or in Christianity actually are. There are things that make that true and things that disqualify that. Yeah, there's a lot of pseudo-Christians out there. My brand of Christianity is very Jesus-based, and do what Jesus did, do what Jesus taught. Most Christians don't do any of that. Yeah, unfortunately. Wow, I thought my kid wearing her Tudor costume to school was crazy. Because isn't following fashion being a sheep? So the reason it's not superficial, though, is because we have been taught through years of evolution that there are leaders and there are followers, and that, you know, doing what others do is not necessarily just blindly being a sheep. It's a survival trait. Again, in a species that has evolved very tribally, you don't want to be the outlier, because if something goes wrong in your community, you become the scapegoat. If you're the outlier, you're more likely to be targeted, to be blamed for whatever it is that has gone wrong. So no, following fashion is not just being a sheep, it's a survival trait. 100%.
Yeah. Okay, there's my turn my things on. And historically, it's proven too that even if it's something you are not in control of, any difference not enjoyed will make you a target of all kinds of stuff. Like, now, she wasn't great, but one person I find was victim. We could talk about Marie Antoinette as a good example. Now, was she great? No, but France and Austria, not great terms. Xenophobia was a big, big part of what happened to her, because they did not like Austrian foreigner. They didn't like it, and because France, she could control it, they blamed almost everything on her.
Yep, they did.
Getting technical, Louis the 16th is the person we should be putting a bit more. I'm not.
Unfortunately, your sound has dropped again. I can't get to the screen.
Can
Oh,
you
there we are.
hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, good. Yeah, really, if we're gonna blame, all kinds of people could be blamed, including Marie. She's not a saint, but Louis the 16th needs a bit more blame than we end up giving him.
Yep. Agreed. Okay, I'm just going to pause. A message for everyone. Please like and subscribe if you're enjoying this live stream. And if you'd like to see more living history live streams where we talk about the history of fashion and material culture in a more relaxed environment where you can ask your questions and have them answered based on primary source evidence, not just the usual pop history garbage that we find these days. So if that interests you, uh, then please do like and subscribe. And I would also like to thank all of my channel members, my Facebook subscribers, and my patrons on Patreon. All of you who've left super chats, who've given me little gifts. I appreciate all of your support. And of course, those who are patrons or channel members or subscribers on Facebook have access to extra content and extra material, extra resources, videos I don't publish for anyone else. So if you would like to have more information, learn more things, and have access to my Creative Contessa Discord server, where we talk about a wide variety of medieval material topics, then check that out. Consider becoming a patron or a channel member. Let me see. I'm so interested in what common folk pregnancy garb would look like. In the Regency era, actually, it was relatively, they didn't have to do much to modify the garments in the Regency era, at least in the Bridgerton Regency era, because they're already high-waisted. And what the commoners, the so-called commoners, were wearing, we'll say the laborers, maids, servants, members of the working class, they were basically wearing the same garments, just less ornate, without as many of the nice frilly fancy options, but the silhouettes were the same. So pregnancy clothing in this era would have just been basically the same. They didn't have to do much to it because it was already above, the waist was already above where your pregnancy belly actually sits. In other eras, they had to get much more creative about pregnancy clothing, much more creative. In the 15th century, in my era, they actually, a lot of kirtles, which is the gown I'm wearing the dress I'm wearing right now is called a kirtle. They would actually add lacing to the side and maybe get rid of the front lacing altogether. And that way, as the belly expanded, then they would just let out the side lacing so that the front of the body is still covered, but the side lacing allows the gown to expand, the dress, the kirtle to expand to accommodate the pregnant belly. Right? So there's different accommodations that are made once garments start getting really fitted. Before garments get really fitted, it's not an issue. Your garments are voluminous, so it doesn't really matter. But, as of the 12th century, in Europe anyway, things start getting really fitted. And that's when they have to start figuring out ways to accommodate a pregnant belly. Yeah. A great workout. Yeah, finger loop braiding, lace making, as it's known in the 15th century, can be a great workout. And I, in fact, have a version of this where I do really long laces that involves my feet and legs, and that becomes I call it finger Pilates because it's like finger loop braiding combined with a Pilates workout. Let me see. What is your favorite period of history to learn about? Gosh. That's a good question. Mason, what's your favorite is the Tudor period your favorite period of history, or did you settle on that just because of the clothing?
I really like the Tudor period, but I definitely have to say Georgian England has always been at least my second favorite of the periods. The fashion, in fact, the main two historical costumes ever done have mostly been Henry VIII and George III.
Mm-hmm.
Because they've been the people I found the most interesting. Now, of course, I found Henry has always been fairly iconic, and he's still. So I find Henry does better online than George does. So I
Yeah. Although now that Bridgerton is big, you could actually probably, if you tagged Bridgerton on your George III stuff, you could probably get more viewership on that. Should witch count for the drinking game? Yeah. I don't know why anyone thinks that this outfit I'm wearing is that of a witch. I don't know what witches you think that dress this way. Um, Witchcraft in the Middle Ages was not really a thing in Western Europe, and witches didn't have a particular way of dressing. That's a post-medieval development, and it still doesn't look anything like this. So, yes, we drink. Yeah, Vicky, are you Amish? The Contessa drinking game is going to be. I'm going to have to come up with a set of rules, comments that we frequently see that are interesting. It'll be, are you Amish? Are you a witch? Will you marry me? Let's see, what are some of the other ones? Medieval people stank.
Yeah. You can also have a category of, do you have something wrong? Is there a condition? Are you
Oh, yes.
experiencing something?
Yeah, are you okay?
I'm sure you've gotten those too.
Oh yeah, all the time. Yeah.
I get it.
Especially when I'm finger lubricating, because then people think I'm suffering from some kind of weird regulated seizure. I guess. Let me see. The comment, Regency and Edwardian is maybe tea with Tasha's favorite period. I don't know if I really have a favorite period of history. I focus on the 15th century because it's a period of history in Europe where there is, at least at the upper echelons of society, there's this beautiful romantic, in a modern sense, courtly culture that is very inspired by, the fables and fantasy stories, tales of the Middle Ages. And there's a really elegant kind of interaction between courtiers that is all bound up in the way they dressed, in the way they danced, in the music they listened to, in the songs they sang, in the food they ate. And there's just something so beautiful about the rituals and pomp and circumstance to me in the 15th century. You also still have knights who are still training and who are still warriors and men at arms and real serious athletes. That's really attractive to me. And I've just always been attracted to the aesthetic of the 15th century from childhood. But I am honestly interested in history full stop, because for me, history is not a series of dates. It's not a series of battles. It's not something that is determined by great men. History is a story. It's an epic. It's an amazing, fascinating series of interactions and events and the tale of how people live their lives, of how the things they do to survive and thrive. I don't need to read fiction. I just read history, because if you read history, history is stranger than fiction in many cases, right? But the problem is, I don't know about Mason. Are you? Do you go to public school, private school? If you don't mind my asking.
Public.
That's fine. I went to public school too, right? So, in my experience, history is taught in the dullest, most colorless, most unrelatable way that it possibly can be. Do you agree with that?
I agree. We are currently on our World War I unit, and they avoid talking about everything that's actually interesting. And in my opinion, that's part of why people think of history as so boring. Because when you are kind of forced to learn it, they don't tell you anything interesting.
Nope. They never talk about how people ate, what games they played, how they spent their daily lives, right? So for us, it's just these battles that happened forever ago, and why is that relevant?
We did a unit actually recently about how people lived in Newfoundland during the late 18, early 1900s. About what their jobs were, all this stuff they did, what they ate, which is actually pretty interesting. But when it comes to everything else, it's all been done in the most boring way.
Yeah, it's unrelatable, because your average person, your average student in school is not a general. They haven't yet joined the military. So for them, battles have no real meaning, right? They have no, and in the West, obviously there are parts of the world where children see battles firsthand all the time. I'm referring to America, Canada, and Europe. Europeans, right? For children, this isn't relevant. But what would be interesting and fascinating is to find out about the food that people ate in 1066, right? To find out about hear the music that people listened to in 1314, to play a game that people played in 1485, in the case of the transition from Richard the Yorks to the Tudors, right? The Plantagenets to the Tudors. That would actually bring it all to life. Actually doing readings from original chronicles, with their fantastic way of phrasing and exaggerating every single event, right? That would make it seem like an actual story, which is what history is. So I would say that 20th century history is very depressing to me. I don't enjoy reading it because it's just a series of unfortunate events, basically, with no beauty or elegance to it and nothing but wrong missteps for most polities. But I want to learn about it because I want to understand why we're in the mess we're currently in. Whereas the further back you go in time, the less emotionally bound up I am in the events of history, and the more I can enjoy them as a fun story, right? So yeah, I don't really have a favorite. I have some periods that I don't want to cover. I actually do not enjoy reading about Tudor England, not because of Tudor England or England, because it's just a series of really sad stories for the most part.
Yeah.
It's so depressing. Uh, um, you know, Catherine of Aragon starts off on such a high note and dies in obscurity, not allowed to see her only daughter, right? Edward is so corrupted by his tutors that he's turned into this regressive Protestant twat, who, had he lived, would have, I think, done very bad things for England. I think he would have been a terrible king.
I agree.
I think everyone blames Mary the First, but if he had continued, it would have been bloodier. I'm pretty certain.
Oh yeah, I agree. I think he very well may have been worse than his father had he lived to be a grown adult. Plus, look at his uncles, Thomas and Edward Seymour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I really don't enjoy reading up on Tudor England because it's just, there's like no happy endings there.
Sorry. Another drink. Another person asked, Amish?
Everyone take a shot. Whatever your drink of choice is, take a shot. Drink. We're not laughing at you. No, I'm not Amish. God, I wish we could pin this as an auto response. No, I'm not Amish. I'm 15th century Flemish, French, Burgundian, English, and I'm dressed basically in 15th century Lululemon. Is what this is. Someone is asking about leisure wear. This is 15th century leisure wear, but actually it's used for working. So that's why I said it's not quite leisure wear.
Someone said, what in the 1700s is going on?
God, the 1700s is the beginning of colonialization. Well, not the beginning, it's middle of the colonial era, right? It's a mess.
If we're going to get 1700s, maybe I should break this out.
Yeah, I don't really, that's like a multi-part series. What's happening in the 1700s or the 17th century? It's a series of world wars. The 18th century, the 17th and 18th century are a series of world wars, even though most people don't think of it like that. That's what's happening on the sort of macro scale. On the micro scale, it's the beginnings of the Industrial Revolution, which is what results in all of the extreme poverty and squalor and filth that people erroneously associate with the Middle Ages, but is in fact a product of the Georgian and Victorian eras. Right. So big changes happening in the 18th century, and of course, the American Revolution kicks off a series of revolutions that spread all across the Americas, right? The various other colonies start trying to overthrow Portugal and Spain as their colonial masters and France as their colonial masters, thinking Haiti in particular. Right? The 18th century is a period of massive change. more the latter part of the 18th century. But there's also a bunch of world wars. In fact, the American Revolution can be viewed as a world war, actually, because France gets involved and Spain gets involved and lots of people get involved. Yep. What am I doing with the thread? I'm giving myself a blister. Yeah, can you see the blister? There it is. There's the blister. Because this is hemp. This is hemp, and I've just made a whole bunch of laces in the course of this live stream, right? I've made 4 of these, what are called points, laces, right? And these are made out of hemp, so it's pretty rough, actually. And it will be used to attach armor to arming garments for my condottiero. Yep. El tapiz que está detrás inspira la historia del titiritero, la verdadera historia del unicornio. Yeah. So this, can you all see? Can you all see the tapestry here? This is La Dame à la Licorne, the Lady and the Unicorn. It is a series of 6 tapestries that are housed in the Musée de Cluny in Paris, and this is a replica of it. Each of the tapestries is an allegory for a sense. This is, Mason, can you see the tapestry? Can you see it?
Yes.
Do you know which sense this tapestry is an allegory?
No.
Do you know what this instrument is?
No.
This is a portative organ. So it's a musical instrument. So what sense do you think it might be?
Sorry,
if it's
organ. You said it's an organ?
Yes. So which of your 5 senses do you think an organ, a musical instrument, would represent?
Hearing.
Yes, yes. So this is the tapestry that is the sense of hearing, right? Because you have the lady, la dame, playing the portative organ, and you have her damsel here actually operating the bellows, because the portative organ was operated by bellows in this era. There were no electric engines to drive, motors to drive the bellows in this era. So yeah, she's playing a portative organ, which means it's portable, which is why she's out in the countryside. You see the mille fleurs effect, right? She's out in the countryside playing this organ. So yeah, I have all of these. I have replicas of all of the 6 tapestries of the Lady and the Unicorn series. Yep. Let me see. I mean, the starving actually happens in the 19th century, just to be clear. The starvation really starts in the 19th century, not the 18th century, not the 1700s. Okay. So, let's see. I actually, I have today, for those of you who don't know, I actually am now taking classes in Minhwa painting. I'm currently in South Korea, and I'm taking classes on the traditional, speaking of art, the traditional style of painting that is also called folk painting. It's a historic style of painting starting in like the 16th century going forward. And I'm taking classes on Minhwa painting, and I have my daily class is later on this afternoon, not far from now. So I actually have to go so I can prepare and head to my painting class. So any final questions or comments? I know we didn't get to as much Bridgerton today as we planned, but that's how these live streams go, isn't it, Mason?
Yeah.
Yeah, they go where you, the viewer, take us generally. So let's see, final question. You have a great knowledge of history. Do you have friends who are just as passionate about history, especially the 15th century? Yes, Claire, I have a whole household of damsels, men-at-arms, and apprentices who are equally passionate about the 15th century. Yep, there are many people who actually are. Now, would they necessarily be able to talk about it in the way I do? Maybe not. I have a gift for gab, as they say. But yeah, I have a large community of friends across the globe, actually, who are just as passionate about history in general and 14th and 15th century in particular. Mason is passionate about the 16th century and the 18th century, the Georgian era. Okay. Any final questions or comments? If you want to see, I actually posted a picture of my latest Minhua painting. It's the character Bok, which means the Chinese character Bok, which in Hanja means luck or good fortune. Yeah. Okay. Any final questions? Everyone, please check out the channel King Henry's Royal Court. That is Mason's channel. Check it out. If you haven't already seen it, like and subscribe there as well. I would once again like to thank all of you who have participated in today's live streams, who have asked good questions and shared your own knowledge and information, and who've also just joked around. The live stream chat is a place for both earnest efforts and frivolity, and I encourage that. All of you assholes out there who decided to post mean things, well, boo-hoo for you. I'm so sad that you're a broken human and all you can do is be mean. But, you know, that's not my problem. That's your problem. That's a you thing. Otherwise, I have a medieval story time live stream coming up in 2 days, 10 a.m. Greenwich Mean Time +9, Seoul Standard Time, relative to wherever you are in the world. That will be Tuesday evening for many of you, middle of the night for others of you. And then, of course, this coming weekend, we'll have our usual medieval sewing party, during which I'll be talking with Nevis, who may or may not be there right now, about the topic of medieval astrology and magic. So if those topics interest you, please do absolutely tune in. Nevis is a fantastical font of knowledge on this topic. And then we'll have my medieval cooking party on Sunday, my time. Remember, I'm in Korea, for those who are wondering. And then Monday morning, we may have another Frock Flix chat, depending on Mason's availability. So yeah, please like, subscribe, consider becoming a channel member, a patron, or a subscriber on Facebook for access to many extra perks if you're interested in financially supporting my living history endeavors. Mason, any final words for our audience? They've really enjoyed what we've been doing today, so lots of good comments there.
Well, I should like to thank you all for watching and listening to our non-stop talking. Well, I am officially in what I will be wearing to bed, so thank you all for listening to our complete and just constant blabber.
Random flow of blabber. Well, at least, Mason, they know it's not AI garbage. Right? At least they know it's not AI slop, because it's too incoherent in some cases to be AI slop. No, that's self-deprecation. We're not incoherent, Mason. That's not. I don't mean to say that at all. Final comment. It's so funny that the idea of women always changes. I've been studying women in 400s Great Britain, and they had equal access to their inheritance, had businesses, etc. Yes. So basically, throughout history, this is the trend. When civilization decreases and women are required to function fully as equal economic members of the community in order for the communities to survive, for instance, migratory peoples, like the Mongols, then women have almost equal rights and equal footing because they are needed for the community to survive. The second we reach a level of civilization in any given community whereby there is luxury, then suddenly women aren't required to participate for the society to survive, and women's rights and respect take a nosedive. That's kind of the trend throughout history across the globe generally. So yeah, that's not surprising. 400s Great Britain, Rome had withdrawn, and the people were having to kind of fend for themselves, even though the technology was still there. But the Celts tended to be much more egalitarian in general. Yeah. Okay, everyone. If you had any comments, questions, and we didn't answer them or address them, pop them in the comments once the video posts. Otherwise, until next time, may your historical explorations be creative and unexpected. Good night, everyone.